Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Ті, хто воде всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там пивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Хотите жить – бегите. Хотите жить – сдавайтесь в плен. Россия не получит новую территорию Украины. Россия присоединит себя к той катастрофе, которую она принесла на оккупированную территорию нашей страны. Оккупант заполняет могилами захваченную территорию Украины. И все больше могил на территории самой России. Ценой того, что один человек в России хочет продолжать эту войну, кто хочет войны больше, чем жизнь. Ваши жизни, граждане России.
Русский военный корабль. Предлагаю сложить оружие и сдаться. Русский военный корабль, иди нахуй.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to Day 601 of the news. And it's good to see you all once again. And the world is still heating up. It isn't calming down yet.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 48 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine, and also a little bit of what's going on in Israel right now, which we will, of course, talk about specifically in a minute. But before we do, I would like to make a special statement for today. Many of y'all know that we run a stream every single day, 6 days a week, except for Monday. But a very important day passed just yesterday, and we were not able to put out a video or a live stream for it because, of course, it was our off day. And that was the 600th day, of the war in Ukraine. It has been over 600 days now, as of the start of this stream, since the war in Ukraine began. We are closer to the 1000th day of the war than we are the first day of the war at this point. It is unbelievable to think that Ukraine has lasted 601 days as of today, and it's also absolutely insane to think that so many people have supported Ukraine all the way through thick and thin, through the great times and the terrible times, through the dark times, and of course through the amazing times that we're seeing right now. Many of y'all have stood steadfast in supporting Ukraine across the entirety of the internet. And I have to say, it's absolutely amazing. It's wonderful to know that the Lee Spring Army has continued to push on and soldier on even 600 days into the war. And it's just absolutely unbelievable. We'd also like to give a huge shout out to every other internet community out there who has also been behind Ukraine and supporting them through and through for 600 days. Because it's absolutely unbelievable to think that so many of us have been here and covering this war and watching this war for so long. It's been so long that I can't even honestly remember a time in my life at this point where I wasn't doing this. It's been...
You know, I'm no math expert, but I think 3 days probably doesn't equal 601. How did it get to this point, Russia?
A very good point. Turning point, Russia. But anyways,
I would love to get an answer on that one.
And I would love to get an answer on that too, to be honest with you. And Russia has a little bit of an answer. We don't have it tonight, but I'm sure they'll be coming out with one very soon. But, of course, I have to say, it is absolutely wonderful to know that so many of y'all are here with us still, 601 days later after the start of this war, and still have a care and an attention on the Ukrainian people and the heroic struggle that they've been facing in fighting the Russians and trying to maintain their independence and sovereignty against a brutal, tyrannical power in the East. Of course, we're going to be covering all of the news tonight, but one thing I'm also going to say is that tonight we'll be going into a very controversial and very contended topic way later on after the Ukraine war news. And many of y'all have heard about the hospital that has been hit inside of the Gaza Strip. We will be covering that here on this channel tonight after the Ukraine war news summary is over, because we've been trying to comb through all the footage that we can and see what really happened based off of the video evidence. We have something of a somewhat clear answer, but I'd like to say that even before we get to that, because that's probably about an hour and a half down the road, we do not want to say that it is a definitive statement. We really don't know who conducted the attack. The video evidence is very compelling in one direction, but we don't know if the video evidence has been doctored, altered, or anything like that. So just keep that in mind by the time we get to that point of the stream. But moving on into Ukraine, the British Ministry of Defense has come out today with a statement that backs up everything that has been seen in the area of Avdiivka. For the past 5 days, the Russians have been mercilessly conducting a counteroffensive into the area of Avdiivka and attempting to encircle the major town that is right along their front lines. Over those 5 days, thousands of Russian soldiers have been killed, dozens of tanks and armored personnel carriers, hundreds of armored personnel carriers have been destroyed, and today we heard a statement from the British Ministry of Defense that is very telling of what they have seen. And of course, we've already made this statement for the large part, that the Russians would be signaling some kind of an offensive defeat very quickly due to the overwhelming losses they took in the first few days. And this is what the British Ministry of Defense has come out with and stated today. And this is a couple of their statements right here. Russia has highly likely begun a coordinated offensive across multiple axes in the east of Ukraine. Russian forces in Donetsk are conducting a combined arms offensive on the heavily defended town of Avdiivka, which has been on the front line since 2014. The town is a major obstacle in preventing Russian forces from their wider objective of taking control of the Donetsk Oblast. Russia's attack is likely being carried out with multiple armored battalions, which are attempting to envelop the town. It is likely to be the most significant offensive operation undertaken by Russia since at least the beginning of this year. Entrenched Ukrainian forces have so far likely, and of course they're saying a lot of things with a caveat, but all of this is largely just backed up as fact, and we'll go into all the video evidence that we've seen, but have so far likely held back the Russian advance, with the latter sustaining heavy equipment and personnel losses. Slow progress and high casualties have likely triggered a change in messaging from Russia from an offensive to an active defense, as successfully clearing Avdiivka looks increasingly unlikely in the short term. In summary, the Ukrainians have defeated the Russian offensive, and the Russian offensive is probably going to be going back onto the back burner again, and it's probably not going to be significant for the rest of the war. The reason why is because the losses have been monumentous over these past 5 days of the Avdiivka counteroffensive. We've never even seen losses this high over such a small period of time, even in the Battle of Bakhmut, which was the bloodiest and deadliest battle for the Russian side, considering that they were using the Chernovokh Wagner, and the Chernovokh Wagner isn't an official part of the Russian army, it's a mercenary group. But one thing is incredible, is that if we go to the front lines for this day, and let me show you all what the front lines have turned into. And so this is the 16th. This is about as updated as it's going to get. Here's what the 15th looked, well, the 14th looked like, because we haven't gotten the 15th. We just hopped from the 14th to the 16th. That's how much ground they were able to take over the past 2 days, past 48 hours or so. Going before that, and going all the way to the offensive, which was right here on the 11th of October, around 5 or 6 days ago. Look at how much ground they have taken for about 4,000 Russian soldiers dead, dozens of tanks lost, and hundreds of armored personnel carriers destroyed. It's practically nothing. It really is nothing when you look at it in the big picture. It's about 1.5 fields here in the south near Vidanye, and also about a half field up in the area of Krasnoarivka. They have got nothing to show for the amount of losses that they've taken. And from what we also understand, the Russian battalion tactical groups in this area are thoroughly destroyed. There's really nothing left of them from what we can understand, at least in terms of offensive abilities. And we got more proof of that today, especially in the area of Vidanye, where we saw a picture of some destroyed Russian armor, and it is just strewn across these fields in the south. There is one main battle tank, 3 armored personnel. Well, actually, there's 2 main battle tanks right there. One of them had a turret toss, and this turret is sitting off to the side. There are 3 BMPs right there, and then further down the road, there are several other APCs and tanks that have been outright lost. just in the past 5 days. On this one street alone, every single street around Avdiivka looks like this. Every single Russian offensive never succeeded in breaking the line. They largely just got destroyed where they engaged the Ukrainian forces and never made it beyond that point. And this is a very telling picture if we've ever seen one from that area of the front lines. And moving on into the northern flank near Krasnoyarivka, the story is quite the same. Even today, we saw that some of the remnants of the Russian offensive that are still out there on the lines are getting absolutely hammered by Ukrainian fire. And we can see right here, a Russian squad not getting hit by an ATGM, they're being engaged by Ukrainian infantry, just pure small arms fire and an FPV drone. And here's the clip. And we can see the Russian forces here on this small road trying to engage. An FPV drone came down and slammed right near them. And it appears that this squad is entirely pinned down in the open with nowhere to go. Once again, an absolute failure. And we can see that the footage has been sped up as they're crawling around and trying to not get hit by bullets. And we can see that everyone is starting to crawl and another FPV drone hits them. It's an absolute disaster. And these guys don't even have armor support anymore because most of their armor support has been destroyed already in under a week. So these guys are just being sent up to the front with no armor support, really no artillery support from what we can understand. They are being wiped out. And the casualty report once again backs that up today. It has been terrible. This is something that I would say is equivalent to one of the worst failed offensives that we've seen. Perhaps the Battle of Verdun? As far as the Germans were concerned, that was an abysmal failure for them. The French also had a bloody stalemate in that battle as well, more so a victory because they did hold Verdun. But this is very similar to the Battle of Verdun or the Battle of Stalin. Well, it's not even comparable to the Battle of Stalingrad because Stalingrad at least lasted for some time. This only lasted about 5 days. It's terrible. I can't even put this onto scale of how much of a failure this offensive has been. And to see a whole bunch of Russian soldiers just laying in a field with no support anywhere, getting hammered by FPV drones and small arms fire, when they started off with almost nothing but armor, and these guys were riding in on APCs, that tells you how badly this thing has gone. They don't even have anything to ride out of the battlefield with to retreat at this point. And moving on from that clip, that's not the only one. We saw another clip of another Russian column failing to advance just today. And this is one of those remnant columns that they have that are still trying to push, but are completely failing in the offensive right now. And we can see the entire column moving down the tree line. And we can see the artillery, well, maybe an ATGM even, hitting one of the vehicles. We can see smoke rising from some of the destroyed Russian vehicles right here. We can see 2 smoke pillars. One of them is a burning fire. There appears to be another vehicle somewhere around here in the tree line. We can see more Ukrainian artillery slamming down around this column. And now we can see one of them just going up into a nuclear hellfire, pretty much.
A nice bright fireball lighting up the night sky.
Man, I don't know
that
why.
smoke is almost like super white for it to be nighttime. Like, why does it look like that?
Dude, that stuff looks like cotton balls, man. You know, the Russians are about to sit there and go, oh, medical aid. They're about to see that and be like, it's the first cotton swab I've seen. But now it's turned into a field of burning stars in the field, and we can now see another Russian squad moving down the tree line past some of their destroyed vehicles. We already know this is going to be disaster. This spells disaster. We can see the Ukrainian FPV drones coming in and dropping bomblets onto the squad. Also, by the way, do y'all notice that that's one of the few Akhmat armored cars that we've seen at this point in the war? And it's been destroyed, along with the 2 main battle tanks behind it. And that's a T-90. And that looks like a T-72 of some sort. But completely destroyed, as per usual. Oh, bled, it's a little toasty. Well, at least he's warm. I mean, you know, it could be the opposite. But we can see them dropping another bomblet onto another group further down the tree line. That one blew up in the trees. And we now see more Russians doing their thing. We can see a grenade being dropped into one of their trenches, absolutely nailing them. We can see them just getting slammed everywhere. Literally everywhere. And if an FPV drone is able to take out one of the last things on the battlefield, which is just raw infantry forces, I think the picture is very clear. These folks have failed the offensive. It was an entirely armored offensive being conducted by armored units. These BTGs were, as far as we can tell, equipped fairly well for what the Russian army is right now. And to see that there's only infantry left on the battlefield, that is a very telltale sign that everything the Russians had to start off this offensive with is gone. And moving into our last clip, we can even see another interesting thing. What we're going to watch right here is a Russian BTR-82. This is a special kind of a Russian wheeled armored personnel carrier that has a 30mm autocannon on top of it. I don't know the exact designation. It's like a 2A40 or something like that, 2A37. But they're firing off into the distance. And this is probably the luckiest APC in the whole battle. It's probably the only one we've seen that was missed by a Ukrainian ATGM. But here's the clip. We see them firing the gun. Whoa! Did you see that?
What was that?
That is an ATGM. Oh my lord!
Oh my god, man. It's like a fly like going over their head or something.
Dude, dude, the Russian didn't even realize what happened. Look at this. Oh!
Obliata, there goes a horsefly.
Dude, he looks back, he's like, what the hell? He's like, when did he get out?
Oh, they figured it out.
Oh, they figured it out now. Oh my lord! And look how muddy the ground is already. This is the worst. This is the worst. You can't get stupider than this. They sat there and said, let's have an armored offensive when the weather is the worst for an armored offensive. Let's do it then. Not any other time. Let's do it right now.
His was a rare sighting of the Ukrainian horsefly.
Here we can see the Russian crew crap itself as the ATGM flies right over their heads. Oh. Oh my gosh. If I was on that BTR, man, I would have painted that thing brown when that thing flew over me, man. I would have been scared to death. And it's so freaking quiet. It's so much more quiet than you would think it would be. I mean, like, it literally just kind of like skims right over them. No noise or anything. That is terrifying.
That's like the luckiest the Russians have ever been in any of these videos we've ever watched.
That really is, because this thing was probably about a foot away from hitting the BTR. Oh my lord. It looks like...
That is crazy.
It looks like it might be a Stugna missile, actually. Like, you can hardly see it. It's just a blur, but it looks a lot like a Stugna missile with how its fins are set up. But a lot of ATGM fins look like that because they have to actually contour to the shape of the missile, but that's beyond the point. That thing was almost about to hit that BTR. These guys are probably the only ones that have operated an APC in the offensive and are going to live to at least tell this tale for a little bit. Absolutely bizarre and a crazy clip to see. These Russians are probably some of the luckiest ones we've seen. They need to go buy lottery tickets so that way they can win 9 million rubles, or about the equivalent of $5 US. We're going to be moving on from the area of Avdiivka and the failure that has been, and we're about to move on into something that a lot of y'all are here for tonight. A lot of y'all have seen the title a lot of y'all have not just seen our title, a lot of y'all have been hearing all the hoopla around the world today that Ukraine has actually used the ATACMS, according to, speculation, for the first time ever. And the results, from what they're saying, were unbelievably impressive. Well, we're here tonight to tell y'all that is entirely true. The ATACMS was used for the first time today by the Ukrainian army, and it was way more successful than anybody thought it would be. We actually have a clip of the ATACMS being fired from somewhere along the southern front line, and here's that clip. And keep in mind, these are the beefy boys. These are the biggins. And let me just show you all the biggins here real quick. The ATACMS. It's also in the thumbnail as well, but these things are chubby little missiles. I mean, these things are huge. Just look at that. That is one chunky missile right there. That's the kind that Wile E. Coyote would buy in Roadrunner and try and use against the Roadrunner. That's how big of a missile it is. It's fairly impressive. But what's even more impressive about this thing is watching it fire in the middle of night, and not just one, but two of them at the same time. So here's the clip.
Mission Control, we have liftoff.
And there they go. They're going to go land on the moon. Oh, wait a minute. There's a third one.
I hate to even ask, but how much are those things per shot?
About $900,000 a shot. But we've actually been able to get the price down in the modern day to somewhere around $790,000 a missile. So it's actually incredibly
It's not too
economical.
bad, actually.
Yeah,
I was thinking you were going to say more like, like 10 or 20 million a shot.
No. Like, the Storm Shadow is actually so, like, the thing about what the, like, Ukrainian long-range missiles that have been provided by the West is that the Storm Shadow is a great missile. Honestly, the Storm Shadow is way better than the ATACMS in most regards. It's stealth. It has a much farther range. It carries about the same explosive warhead from what we know publicly. But it's also 3 times more expensive than an ATACMS. The Storm Shadows and the Scalp EGs, the same missiles, just that one is made by Britain and one's made by France, they both cost about $3 million a piece, which heavily limits what the Ukrainians can use them on because they get a much smaller number of those missiles because they cost so much more. These things are actually much more on the cheaper side. They only have a range, I think, and let me make sure to pull this up and get the range right, because I think it's about 150 miles. But Lockheed Martin has a little infomercial about the ATACMS. We're not gonna. Oh, wait a minute. The maximum range.
They're back to marketing to the civilians again.
Yeah, they're like, hey, son, you want to buy an ATACMS? But the maximum range is 300 kilometers, and 300 kilometers to miles means that this ATACMS missile has a range of about 186 miles, according to the advertised figures. So it actually has a pretty decent range. The Scalp EG and the Storm Shadow have a range of about 250 miles, so it's only adding about 60 miles, 65 miles extra to the range. And also, let me make sure that we get a price on this little thing. It's actually one of the biggest missiles the Ukrainians have been given. But according to the price, in 1998, these things were about $820,000 US. That is equivalent, and actually I was wrong on the price, that is about equivalent to $1.4 million in the year 2022, adjusting for inflation. So there's still half the cost of a Storm Shadow. Still half. So you can get twice the firepower for just 60 miles less range with these ATACMS missiles. And about the same amount of firepower as well. They're just not stealth. And I guess the stealth or the low visibility feature on the Storm Shadow is what adds so much to the price. But we can see those 3 ATACMS on their way. And knowing the actual modern day price of them, that means that we're watching about $4.5 million of missiles flying off into the distance right there in this clip. But it really did make a difference. I'll be showing you all the difference it made. In the city of Berdyansk, there is a very large Russian army helicopter base that has been based out of that area for quite some time. Quite an incredibly long time, as a matter of fact. Almost since the beginning of the occupation. And it's right out here. The Berdyansk airport. Pretty impressive, right? I mean, like, this thing looks like it is well kept.
It looks like it's almost abandoned, actually.
That's because of these, Comrade. It is abandoned. But what is amazing is that the Russian army saw this, and compared to their Russian bases, it looked pretty high-end, so they began to use it for helicopter operations in the southern area. From what we know, according to Russian mill bloggers, and I didn't show any of that on stream tonight, we don't have any clips for that here in the area of Berdyansk, they have said already that the attack on Berdyansk airport is the single highest aviation loss for the Russian army in this war in a single instant. That is unbelievable, and they are already admitting that, and that must mean the losses are so high, they're going to be undeniable for the Russian government. They're going to have to come out and state that the not the Storm Shadow, the ATACMS missiles have just devastated the Russian helicopter forces on the southern front. But moving on to the clips, and we'll be leaving that. Well, actually, I'll show y'all just to add to the proof. Later on in the day, there were pictures from the area of Berdyansk, and it appears that this is part of the fuselage of one of those ATACMS missiles. It says guided missile, surface attack, MGM-140A. And MGM-140A is the exact designation that the ATACMS missile has in the U.S. Army. So this is, from what we understand, a part of the fuselage of the ATACMS. We can also see other English inscriptions on the missile. This one also has the fins clearly on the back of the fuselage, showing us this is most likely a legit ATACMS fuselage that has wound up in Berdyansk because of what happened. But here is the clips of what the airfield looked like. It was a scene that looks like it came straight from hell. The airfield is practically destroyed from what we can see. Here's the clip. we can see 2 visible strikes, 3 visible strikes for the 3 ATACMS that were fired from the southern front.
Вот это БК уже пошел нахуй.
And we can see 1 Mi-17 right here that has survived.
Вертолет куда смотрит? Туда?
But based off of these raging infernos and the massive explosions coming out of them, we can assume several things. Those are either helicopters, fuel depots, or multiple helicopters burning in clusters.
О, нифига, он туда отрабатывает.
And this Russian's mind is being blown. He has just witnessed American firepower.
He's torn between loving the fire or hating the destruction of his only military vehicles.
Там какая-то хуйня еще летит.
Oh, блядь!
Whatever is blowing up in that fire is serious. I mean, that thing is like flashing off every few seconds. But I would have to say,
This
man,
Russian doesn't even sound upset. He just sounds like he's happy that the sub's on fire.
dude, he's probably thinking, yes, I don't have to go on another kamikaze mission. Thank God. That's probably what he's thinking. He's like, they won't have enough helicopters anymore. And he's probably actually really excited about this because, I mean, hell, he doesn't care. Why would he care? He's just some Russian grunt, and the government clearly doesn't care about him. So watching the helicopter he probably have to fly tomorrow or work on tomorrow, burning to the ground, I'm sure he's fine with it. But to be honest with y'all, this is a $4.5 million expenditure that was well worth it. I mean, we get to watch a full-on Russian fireworks show brought to us by some of America's pretty high-end missiles. Not the highest end, we're of course replacing the ATACMS right now, but pretty high-end stuff. And I love to see it. So hopefully we'll get to see more of these fires. Hopefully we'll see that the Ukrainians have actually been provided more ATACMS than just the 3 of them that we saw launched. And assuming that they launched 3 of them, that probably indicates they have a lot more of them. We rarely ever see the Ukrainians fire off their entire allotment of weaponry at a single time. Take, for example, the Storm Shadows and Scalp EGs. They actually use those over an incredibly long period of time. The first ones were introduced in the middle of this year, probably around June or July, and we've seen them used all the way up until about 2 weeks ago or so when the Black Sea Fleet was hit in Sevastopol and the 2 ships, the submarine and the Rapucha-class landing ship, were destroyed by the Storm Shadows, and also the Black Sea Fleet headquarters as well. That was also destroyed on another day. So we know that they don't use all of the stuff all at one given moment. So this is clearly indicating they have a large inventory of ATACMS missiles to be working with, but let's move on into the second clip, and let's see the next little video of the attack at Berdyansk. And JT said, 80s tech, but they're certainly effective. And I would agree with you, it is 80s tech for the most part, but you also have to remember, the Russians are working with 70s tech, so this thing is still 10 years ahead of them. And this thing is considered somewhat old by modern U.S. military standards. But here's the next clip showing the roaring fires at Berdyansk Airport. And we can see it appears that the Russians are firing off some kind of a surface-to-air missile. And we see the cameraman looking out into the distance. And this also appears to be very close to the same spot we saw last time. We can see 1, 2, 3, the burning fires we saw before. Out there to the left, we can also see what appears to be a 4th fire. We did not see a 4th ATACMS fired, so we do not know where that fire is from.
Сказать-то сказали, это одно, блядь. Информация. Да, чтоб сразу меня осколками посекло, нахуй. Ты смотри, вон туда еще уебали.
And we can actually see that that little fire over there was actually 2 separate fires that later on merged into one massive fire. Very important because that may indicate there are 2 separate vehicles burning over there. Oh, that clearly looks like a helicopter. I mean, you can kind of make out the fuselage right there, just a tad. So that might be a whole helicopter or a plane. We can't really tell, but it is a vehicle that's on fire.
Also, real quick, not related to the video, I'm seeing some folks in the chat say that the U.S. Embassy in Lebanon is being overrun, but I can't find a source for that. If you know where to find the info, please put it in the chat so I can find it. I saw a large crowd going that way earlier, but I haven't seen any info about it being actually attacked.
And please share any info y'all have with us on that. We will be trying to look into that if possible. In the meantime, we can see the damage that the ATACMS caused. Oh! Is that a Ka-52? Oh, that's a K-52. It looks pretty close to the fire.
Слышь, нихуя прицельно так-то, пиздец.
Oh man, it's getting juicy up here in Bryansk.
Смотри, раз, два, три. Блять, холодно, брат, я же без футболки.
Well, you see the helicopters continuing to burn.
Две восьмерки, нахуй.
Right now, we can't actually get a good head count on how many helicopters and equipment has been destroyed at the airfield, but it appears to be an incredibly large amount.
У восьмерки это же. А, у них С8.
Нет, у них нет давно. Кашка горит вон, бля. Бля, яки.
We now see the smoke covering the entire airfield at this point. The fires have burned quite prolifically up to this point. And it appears that that middle helicopter is once again bursting into explosions.
This guy's a little bit shaky.
He's going, oh, ghost, boo.
Это торчупани, по-моему, не?
Ooh, that one had a little burn off right there.
Вот там, там это. Что это? Четверка горит. Кашечка.
Ни информации, блядь, ни вывода, нахуй. Телефоны повесили и заебали.
And while we're watching this video, oh, very nice. So let's go back and look at that again. I think unguided rockets just cooked off right there and then just shot into the rear of that helicopter, making the fire even worse. Oh yeah, that's what happened. So we can now see the helicopter is even worse off than it was. Of course, completely irreparable already, but it's going to burn it down even quicker. Oh my god! Dude, oh shit is having a fit right now. Like they're like, man, this is unsafe. It's literally a fireworks show. The unguided rockets are burning on their bodies, so a lot of the solid propellant is just kind of burning off into the air as the missile flies on. We hear more explosions.
А вот это БК уже пошел.
Так, вертолет куда смотрит?
We see whatever that is out there once again exploding.
Холодно, пизда. В натуре?
Dude, the Ukrainians could probably see this explosion all the way from Novoprokopivka and went, oh yes, this is beautiful. Man, all the Russians in this video actually sound shaky, unlike the other guy who was laughing. Everyone in the background is going, helicopters are burning. It's like, yes, they are. Run for your life. Man, that guy sounds delusional. This man's lost his composure. Woo.
It's half vodka and half dumb.
A good Russian mixture. Oh, they're running!
50-50.
Oh!
Oh.
Dude, the guy tripped, look! He said, run! And...
He did. He said, oof!
Dude, he's turning into the shrimp from Shark Tales. Dude, he sat there and said, "Oh, run! Oh my goodness, we're gonna burn up in hellfire!" It's like, oh my god! Oh, there they go. I'm taking it that these guys aren't coming back to the army. I think they've had enough.
Там 4 или 5 бортов.
Бомжур, мужчины.
Фонари выключай. Фонари выключай.
Это БК.
Oh, man. Well, that's the end of the clip. Of course, amazing to see the fires burning at Bryansk Airport. And also great, it's not great, but it's hilarious to see the Russians freaking out watching their own stuff burn. It's great. It's wonderful. You can't top that stuff because they know they're screwed. The Russian military knows they're screwed at this point. They're just trying to pretend like they're not. But with that, we're going to be moving out of this news segment inside of Bryansk, and really quickly, we're going to be moving over to Matthew really quickly, because Matthew has been hearing, and we've also been seeing this a lot in the live chat right now, that the U.S. Embassy inside of Lebanon may be under attack right now from a angry mob. And I was wondering, Matthew, have we been able to get any news on that?
So I haven't found anything conclusive about it, but I have seen earlier, about 3 hours ago, there was a large crowd of people making their way to the U.S. Embassy to apparently go protest in front of it. I don't see anything about the embassy being overrun. I do see that there are people allegedly, quote unquote, protesting out there, but y'all know how protests go in the Middle East. It typically turns into a riot. So I'm not seeing anything official saying that's been overrun. Also, no response from the U.S. either. So it looks like some sources might be jumping the gun a little bit, but I'm not going to say that for certain. Because it could spiral out of control at any minute. I'm also seeing folks saying that the British embassy is also having some problems as well, but I also can't find information about that either. So I'm waiting to see if I can get some concrete sources on that before we report it for certain.
Interesting. We will be looking into that a little bit more. From what we understand at the moment, just to clarify this, we do not understand that the embassy is under attack in Beirut. It may be under protest, but we have not seen that there's been any kind of a riot or anything like that that has overrun the embassy like we've seen times before, for example, in Saigon during the fall of Vietnam, or at, of course, inside of Libya a couple of years ago, but we can't really say much about that because we all know that that's embroiled in a lot of controversy. But moving on from that, from what we understand at the moment, there's a protest going on at the embassy, but it has not turned violent, at least according to the news we have right now. If the situation changes in the middle of the stream, we will, of course, make sure to update everyone as soon as possible, as soon as we get news that the protest may have turned into a riot and may have started to break into the embassy. But moving on from that, we're now going to be returning back to Ukraine. And once again, if y'all would like to hear what's going on in Israel, and y'all also want to hear any information or news about the attack that occurred on the hospital inside of northern Gaza today, we will be covering that later on in the stream. We will not be covering it in our usual way, where we go around and try and keep things light. It, of course, is an atrocity, but we're going to be trying to try and show or at least see what happened and then let y'all make a decision on who y'all think did it, because right now everyone's kind of split down the middle. Some people are thinking that it was an Israeli Air Force attack on the hospital. Other people are saying that it was the Palestinians who actually attacked the hospital themselves. The video footage is actually showing something completely different than those two majority answers at this point. It appears to be something else. But of course, just stick around. We'll be going into that later. But we've got to get back into Ukraine and continue on the news up here. And so moving on.
Also, just a quick note. I see some folks citing the New York Post as their source for the information. I would take that with a grain of salt. I have nothing personally against the New York Post, but they have put out things in the past that I found a little bit on the fence, to say the least. So I'm going to definitely hold off on that and check that out in the meantime, but I wouldn't take that alone for proof.
I would also agree as well. Some news organizations are much more prone to, I don't know how to call it, clickbait or yellow journalism more so than others. The Daily Mail is usually one of those. The New York Post is also another. Usually they try and go for sensationalist titles and articles more so than actually trying to report on the news. So if you see anything from them, kind of take it with a grain of salt unless if it's completely corroborated. But with that, we're now going to be moving on into our location unknowns. And if y'all thought the video of the Ukrainian ATGM missing the Russian BTR was insane, I can't lie. Every single location unknown we have today is absolutely insane. ATACMS being launched again. We also have a magazine, an AK magazine, catching a bullet, which was nuts to see. We also saw the Ukrainians get a motorcycle, and we also saw a pressure detonation in the barrel of a Nona SPG. The location unknowns are literally just insane today. It's like a freak show of location unknowns. But before we get into that, I also have to mention this real quick. Many of y'all have been talking about what's going on inside of the Middle East, around Israel, inside of Lebanon, with the U.S. carrier task forces that are out in the Mediterranean right now. We don't just have one of them now. We actually have two carrier task forces inside of the Eastern Mediterranean at the moment, and I believe they're also being joined by an LHD, which is currently inside of the Red Sea and making its way up towards the Mediterranean. There is a lot going on, not just in Ukraine, but around the entire world. And a lot of y'all have put in some very interesting comments. And Matthew, what have they been saying?
All right, so we got some really good polls to address, and our very first poll says Israel has asked for $10 billion from the U.S. for military support, and the question is, should the U.S. send the support? 52% said we should give them that aid. 19% said maybe not so much. 18% said we should hold off on that aid, and 11% said unsure. And $10 billion, that is a very big ask. Ukraine would love $10 billion too right now as well. So we have two competing interests here between Ukraine and Israel. I will say that it's really hard to choose between the two. But considering how volatile Israel's situation is, I think Israel might have to take the priority in the moment and get some of that aid. And now I'm not sure if all $10 billion of it should go to just Israel. Maybe they could lower that amount just slightly and send some to Ukraine. But apparently Israel does have a need for that exact amount. But, you know, the poll here says that 52% says we should give them that aid. And I would have to agree with that generally. But Enforcer, what do you say?
So the annual Israeli military budget is $23.4 billion. Compared to Ukraine military spending, and let me try and get a pre-war number. Ukraine's pre-war military spending was somewhere along the lines of, let's see here. Hang on, I'm trying to actually make sure we get a correct number on this. So that's not going to do. I'm trying to find one from before. Let's see, So the average Ukrainian military spending before the war was around $3.8 billion a year. Israel's average military spending per year is around $23.5 billion a year. If we were to give them $10 billion in a single lump sum, that means that Israel would be getting nearly half of its annual military budget in just one giant chunk from the United States. I would actually have to be honest, I'm 100% for Israel in this current battle that we see right now between them and the Hamas terrorists. But at the same time, we also have to remember that Israel is not a small fry or a weaker country like Ukraine was at the beginning of the Russian invasion. Israel is armed to the teeth, to be quite honest with everyone. They have some of the most advanced main battle tanks in the world, and they don't just have a few of them like the Russians do with the Armada. Their entire armed forces is made up of Merkava Mark IVs, the most latest and greatest variant of their main battle tank. They also have one of the most modern and largest air forces in the world. Hundreds of F-15s, F-16s, and they're even getting F-35s as we speak right now. Truly the most advanced and modern aircraft seen in the world, really. They have a lot of equipment, and a lot of modern equipment at that as well. While I think that we should support Israel, $10 billion, especially if we're having to take that from Ukrainian support and give it to Israel, seems like a strategic blunder. I believe that we should give them something along the lines of maybe, say, $3 billion or $3.5 billion, but $10 billion is a lot, and also they're already well off. And just in case y'all are wondering, how well off are they? I could show y'all some Israeli military equipment and let y'all see.
Man, they got lasers, man. They're literally developing the Iron Beam. Like, that tells you everything. They're developing stuff that we really don't even have in major service yet either.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little weird for them to ask for stuff, you know, because let me show y'all. So one of their normal service rifles, this is actually their service rifle, is the Tavor. That's it right there. I mean, that's a fairly advanced rifle. If you look at most modern armies in Europe, they're using something very similar. The French are using the FAMAS, the British are using the L-85. They're all fairly similar weapon systems to the Tavor. So once again, pretty up to spec. And if they're not using that, they're usually using M4 carbines like this one. Once again, fairly up to spec. But if we move on down, not just through the small arms, because the small arms is kind of small business, and we move on into their tanks, here are their tanks. They have 330 Merkava Mark IVs. Once again, one of the most advanced main battle tanks in the world. And I mean, truly, in the ergonomics department, I don't think any tank beats this thing. It has a pretty decent air conditioner, has a cooled water system that can feed each of the crews water at any given time, completely cooled. It's like chilled water, where it's actually cold, not just like lukewarm or hot, sitting inside of a tank. I mean, this thing is impressive. It really is. They also have Merkava Mark IIIs, which are very similar, just a little less armored, and they have somewhere around 160 of those and another 660 of them in storage. You know, with that kind of a number of heavy armor, and especially that advanced armor for such a small land area, that is already showing that they don't really need the support for the armored department. As far as their armored personnel carriers go, they also have 1,360 of those. Most of them are M113s, and while being a somewhat older armored personnel carrier, it does the job for what they need. The tanks largely support the infantry once they're offloaded, according to Israeli doctrine. The M113s are just there to get them to the front. That's it. It's not really used beyond that. Or it's used to quell insurrections or riots, but that's a whole other thing. They also have 250 of these, which is based off of the T-54. It's also an armored personnel carrier. Pretty decent. They also armored the hell out of this thing, so it can pretty much stand up to most punches from an RPG or something similar.
Looks like something out of Mad Max or something. The way it's like got angles everywhere on it and stuff.
Oh yeah, I mean, like it's a crazy looking vehicle. The Israelis have a knack of just taking things and just fiddling with them and coming up with some pretty wild stuff. Their APC department really is an example of that. Like this thing, the Namakon. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but this is also an Israeli armored personnel carrier that can be used to drop off infantry in the field. It's a pretty freaky system, but once again, it's an armored personnel carrier that works. So once again, their armored personnel carrier department is incredible. And also, here's some of their more modern iterations like the Namer, which you can see right here. I believe this thing is entirely its own design. I think it's based off of a Bradley hull, but it's been modified to Israeli needs. They have about 120 of these. So, you know, when you look at the Israeli armored forces, doesn't really look like they need much help. They also have many armored cars. They have the Wolf, which is their go-to armored car, pretty much like a Kerpy, just a little different. Once again, don't really need support there.
They're actually pretty well armed. Like I knew they were like a pretty strong defense force, but they're even more well armed than I thought. But one thing I want to know, I'm surely not the only one that's thinking this at this point, because with the situation destabilizing so fast in the Middle East, I think personally I think the U.S. needs to start thinking about saving our money a little bit more closely, because it looks like we might end up getting drug into a war that we need to help defend our own interests. And while it's always good to help out our allies, we need to start thinking about our own defense. I know some folks are going to say, well, we already spend, $700 billion or whatever annually on defense. And that's true. But if a war broke out, we're going to need all of that money because we're going to come to a lot of people's aid at the same time, our own military and our own forces. And to me, it's looking a lot more likely that something big is going to break out because Iran and the Middle East is destabilizing extremely fast. And I don't see that situation getting better anytime soon.
And I don't see it getting better either. And I would have to agree with Matthew for the most point. Considering that it already appears we're going to be getting involved in another Middle Eastern war, it seems more important for us to be ready for the U.S. Army, the Marines, the U.S. military to go over there because we're already going to be over there from what we can tell fairly soon if the situation continues to deteriorate like it is. And really quickly, just glossing over everything else so we're not spending all night listing off the shopping list of stuff that Israel has. They have 600 M109 Paladins in service. 600 of them. Most nations in the world, even most of countries like, your major economic players like Japan, Britain, Germany, they have nowhere close to that amount of artillery in service, yet the Israelis do. And when you look through everything, and when we go down to their Air Force, here's their Air Force. They have 9 F-35s in service, 52 F-15s, 25 F-15Is, and then another 300 or so F-16s. There's really no reason for them to require or need additional funding because it's not like the Ukrainians who are bad off and they need to get up to speed really quickly. The Israelis are already up to speed and have been able to keep that way for an incredibly long time. On top of that, considering the strategic interest in the Middle East and considering we will probably get involved there really soon, I think it's more important for us to continue to prioritize Ukraine for foreign support and prepare the U.S. military for conventional wars or asymmetrical wars that will start to happen in the Middle East that we will get involved in. Because it does appear that at this point that may be a reality in the future, or at least a possible reality. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion, and also kind of explain why I would actually be in the minority that says we should give Israel less support than $10 billion or really no support because they're already doing incredibly well as it is. From what we understand, they are getting the situation under control very quickly inside of Israel. So $10 billion would kind of be like throwing the money somewhere it doesn't really need to go when it could go to Ukraine or it could go into the U.S. military. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next poll says Axios reports that the U.S. might deploy U.S. troops in Israel if Hezbollah gets involved. And what are your thoughts? 45% said that would be a smart move. 27% said that would be a bad move. 19% said I need more info. And 9% said unsure. And this would be the first time that the U.S. actually deploys the troops in Israel since this conflict broke out there. And they're saying if Hezbollah gets involved. So these are, backdoor reports of allegedly conversations going on in the U.S. government. So take that with a grain of salt because sometimes they exaggerate and sometimes they don't, tell the whole truth here. But if that is true, that means the U.S. is very close to sending in troops on the ground in Israel, which is obviously a major escalation and would directly involve the U.S. in the war, eventually with Iran, because Iran will get involved eventually. They've made that very clear, and that is not good because we don't know if Iran has nukes. We don't know how willing they are to jump right into the middle of this hot fire and get involved with it. So, very concerning, but at the same time, we need to stand strong and get ready to send troops. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would agree. I think the United States needs to prepare to possibly get involved in the Middle East physically. The Middle East is, of course, a completely different situation than in Ukraine. We're not dealing with what we understand a nuclear power inside the Middle East at the moment, except for Israel. That's really the only one we know is most likely a nuclear power. But we can see here there is no nuclear power at play. We can get involved if we need to, and it does appear that very soon we will have to get involved. A war with Iran, however, is not going to be as straightforward as many people are thinking it is. The geography of southern Iran is incredibly sparsely populated, and it's also very mountainous. So if we actually try and get involved in a war with Iran, it's going to be very difficult to fight them. Just from a land war perspective. From a air war perspective, it might actually be quite easy, considering most of the Iranian Air Force and ground self-defense forces are incredibly dated with their equipment. But as far as the ground forces go, it is going to be incredibly difficult to possibly launch a invasion of Iran or an intervention because they have hundreds of miles to go before they ever reach a populated area along the Caspian Sea. And that will, of course, stretch the supply lines. They'll open them up to attack. It'll be a bit of a deal. But if we have to get involved, I think we should get involved in this situation and protect American interests inside of the Middle East, as well as protect the nation of Israel from countries that are, of course, bad players out there and not necessarily for the right thing. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have one last poll to go over. It says the President of the United States is allegedly en route to Israel at this time. And is this visit wise? 50% said yes, it sends a strong message. 22% said no, it is extremely risky. 16% said, it's risky, but worth it. And 12% said unsure. And I have to say that, me personally, I do not understand the logic behind this visit at this time if he's actually on the plane heading to Israel. Israel is a hotbed for activity right now, and it could break out in a very bad war any second. So that's not the best place in the world for the President of the United States to be. And I know that it would be a big stretch to attack Israel while the U.S. President is there, but we're dealing with thugs, and these thugs really don't have any reservations before they do anything stupid. So I would say it's extremely risky, and I really don't see the worth behind it. So I would really like to know what the logic was behind that decision. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would largely have to agree. I believe this decision is putting the President of the United States into some incredible danger and uncertainty, especially considering what's going on over there. We don't know what may happen when he arrives. The security right now, while it may be ramped up heavily, who knows if it actually will be able to stand up to whatever happens. We have no idea. I think it would be a better idea for the president to remain in the United States right now for the president's safety and to allow the situation to unfold a little bit further. And then if it boils over into a full-on conflict, and once the situation is brought in hand, then go over there. Because right now what we're seeing is like the United States joining World War II in late 1941, and then FDR hops onto a battleship and sails over to Britain immediately. That's kind of like what we would be seeing, and they did not do that. FDR stayed in the United States, I believe, until about late 1942, and then once the situation had been brought in hand had a handle put on it, trying to make sure my phrases make sense there, in the North Atlantic, then he traveled over to North Africa and then hung out there for a little bit. But I don't think it's a smart idea to put the president in harm's way, and I have a feeling that this decision may possibly be putting the president in harm's way. I think that would be one of the worst case scenarios we could see happening, is if a president ends up getting killed overseas. What is our response then? I mean, we would already be getting involved, but what in the world would that entail? I have no idea. To be honest with y'all, like, what would we do? We can't nuke anyone, but we're also going to probably be getting involved anyways. So how do we ramp up our response from there? We really wouldn't be able to. And considering that most people in the Middle East are probably already understanding we're going to get involved, they really don't have any reason to not attack the president of the United States. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. I don't think it's worth putting the president's life in danger to make a statement. We've already made a statement with the carrier task forces that are currently stationed right off of the coast. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And also, really quickly, I'd like to say, could we please have no politics in the chat? It is a rule, but it's also something that we don't really like to hear. And a lot of people are, of course, trying to spin it a certain way to attack certain political parties. Of course, the party that the president is a member of. And we do not go out of our way to be a partisan group to attack or try and support presidents or certain political groups. That's not what we do on the channel. It's completely unbiased, and regardless of who the president is, whether it be the current one, the former one, the one before that, or the one that was in the early 2000s that had us invade Iraq, I would say the same thing. I think this is a very dangerous move, and it would not be a safe decision. Beyond that, however, I do not want this to become a political thing. We're talking entirely about the safety of the president, the safety of an American citizen that represents the entirety of the United States when traveling abroad, and we do not care if that person is of one political affiliation or another. When he travels overseas, he is representing the entire nation, every single one of y'all. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and we are moving on into our super chat questions. We're fresh out of polls, but real quick, just clarification. The U.S. president is allegedly still going to Israel, and the canceled thing that was going on in the Middle East that was also involving the U.S. president, which was the Jordan summit, that was canceled. But the trip to Israel is still on at the moment, so we'll have to wait and see if it actually turns out to be true, or if maybe his plane redirects at the last minute and, head somewhere else, which would probably be the wiser thing to do. But anyways, moving on to our super chat questions. Up first, we have a very generous $100 donation from Mark, minimally competent drone operator. He has changed his name. He says minimally competent. So he is upgraded now. He's more competent than the last time. And Mark, thank you very much for that support. He says ATACMS is being retired, and those ATACMS are at their expiry date anyway, so the U.S. would have to pay to decommission them, and now just send them 100 of the expiring penetrating warhead ATACMS and clear out the Kerch Bridge. And could the EU buy them and give them to Ukraine?
And thank you so much for the massive amount of support, Mark, a minimally competent drone operator, and thank you for helping the channel keep running. You are absolutely correct as well with your assessment, Mark, about the ATACMS, and that's kind of why we have no issue sending them. Weapons actually have expiration dates, and that's something a lot of people don't know. A lot of people think that weapons can just sit around forever and they'll be fine. And that may be true with rifles. I would know, but it's not true with most other weapons that the military uses, especially things that have any kind of a solid rocket propellant. Bullets even expire over time as well, especially if they're stored in humid conditions. They can end up actually fouling still. So going off of that on a small scale, scaling it up to a missile, of course a missile would also begin to expire at some point as well. And that's why the United States is kind of just throwing these at the Ukrainians, because we're also replacing the ATACMS with a new missile system as well. One that should be farther hitting, heavier hitting, and also better all the way around. So going off of that, I think it's a great thing that we're throwing our older stuff that is going to be thrown out anyways towards a country that can use it, because it means that it's not going completely to waste, although it was going to be pretty much thrown away anyways. So with that, I hope that addresses that part fairly well. And also, I would agree with you, Mark. Why not just send 100 of them? 100 of the penetrating warheads, the ones that actually are able to bust through stuff instead of the cluster rounds that we sent right now. Why not hit the Kerch Bridge? Why not? It's within range. We know that so far most attacks have been successful against the Kerch Bridge. And with the explosive yield of an ATACMS, along with its range, and also the kind of damage we just saw the cluster munitions cause, I would have a very good feeling that the Kerch Bridge would probably be knocked out for longer than a half year, maybe even more than that, if the Ukrainians were to hit the Kerch Bridge with those missiles. And to also answer the last question, I don't really know. That's something that would actually have to be decided in between the U.S. government, the Department of Defense, and also any European countries that would want to do that. The thing of arms dealing is incredibly difficult to get into because it's really a weapon by weapon basis, and also just changes with the mood of the day. For the most part. So it's really hard to say whether Europe would be able to buy them and then send them. I have a feeling that the answer to that would most likely be yes, because we kind of did something similar with the F-16s, and then just said, if you give your F-16s to Ukraine, you can buy F-35s from us. We may do that. We may just say, you can buy the ATACMS from us and then send them over there if you want, or just buy them and then we'll send them to Ukraine, shipping included. We might do something like that. I would not rule that out at all. And so with that, I hope that answers all three of those questions, Mark, and thank you so much once again for upgrading and becoming a minimally competent drone operator. I hope soon that we see you're a proficient drone operator, and thank you so much once again for the massive amount of support and helping the channel to keep on running, because it is folks like you, Mark, who've helped to make this channel possible, and we thank you greatly for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one is also a very generous $100 donation, this time from BC Skyman, another channel legend. And thank you very much, BC, for that massive support as usual, and it's good to see you once again. And BC says, U.S. should support both Israel and Ukraine, and great job, guys, and I'll be gone hunting, but back soon, and love Ukraine. And BC, I gotta say, you are probably the most prolific hunter I know. You get to hunt all the time. I wish I could do that as well, but I'm jealous, I have to admit. But Enforcer, what say you?
This man is single-handedly eliminating the deer population of the United States one trip at a time. And but also, I hope you have a fun time hunting, BC's coming. Whatever you're hunting, I bet it's gonna be great, because you go to some of the craziest places I've heard. Like, you go everywhere, like all the way to Wyoming, all the way up to like Michigan. Everywhere, like places that you would think are like the mecca of like hunting, you've gone. And I hope you have a fun time on this next trip. And also, I would have to agree, the U.S. should support Ukraine and Israel, but I think there's different ways to support Ukraine and Israel from a U.S. perspective. Ukraine is supported monetarily and economically by the United States. I think Israel is going to be supported a completely different way, where we really don't financially support them, but we support them through our presence. We can already see that we're there with 2 carrier task groups. That's no joke at all. That's about 140, 160 U.S. aircraft on standby in the Eastern Mediterranean, ready to go at a moment's notice, along with all the ground forces we've sent there as well. So going off of that, and also the fact that we could easily build up our forces in the area and get involved in any way, shape, or form that Israel would request, and that we could do, I think that's going to be the way we support them instead. So instead of paying them to, of course, deal with the issue, we're probably going to pay our own armed forces to go over there and deal with the issue ourselves. Considering that the geopolitical or the diplomatic situation in the Middle East is entirely different than the one that we're seeing in Ukraine, which has kind of forced our hand where we can only financially support Ukraine instead of getting directly involved. So with that, I would completely agree with that statement, though, BC Skyman. I think we should support them both, but in the way that's best for them. And I think those 2 separate ways, financially for Ukraine, physically for Israel, is probably the best way to go about this, because it also ensures that we'll have direct involvement in the Middle East, and we'll be able to make sure that things go the right way, make sure that things aren't going a little bit too crazy down there. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the massive amount of support, BC Skyman, and helping us to keep the lights on and helping us to keep the channel running, and I hope we were able to address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the final question of the segment, and then we're going to be moving back into the Ukraine war news.
All right, and the last one of the segment goes to another longtime channel legend, Margaret Hemsley, who puts in a $31 donation. And thank you very much, Margaret, for that support. And also, it's good to see you once again as well. And she said, listen to day 65 yesterday. Enforcer Matt was so quiet then. And the Enforcer was asking to reread way back then, LOL. And what was the video you made that almost got you arrested? And this is what happens when there's no live stream. And also, I gotta say, Margaret, I was still trying to get used to the job back then. That was super early, and I really wasn't talking a lot back then. I gotta say, I was very quiet. But also, that's funny. The enforcer was asking to reread way back then. But also, the video that almost got us arrested. I'm not sure if we can even still say what that was about, but that was hilarious. The first time lawyering skills ever popped up from either one of us was then, which got us out of the situation. So, enforcer, what say you?
And I thank you so much for the support, Margaret, and helping us to keep the channel running. And also, I can't believe you're watching streams that are that old. That was, well, let's see. That is 10% of the way to where we are right now in terms of the overall days we've run this thing. And that is actually really cool to hear. And also, just ran me down memory lane asking about, well, me asking to reread lines and stuff. That's been something that's happened since the start because there's so much going on usually that my mind is like everywhere at the same time. And I'm trying to make sure to also hear the statements to be able to answer them. But the video that almost got us arrested, it kind of almost got us arrested, but not really. It actually was us trying to film a video way back in the day in North Alabama at the Browns Ferry nuclear power plant. And our original video was actually going to talk about how nuclear power works. It was going to be revolving around the situation at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant and talk about why nuclear power is safe. And then we started to read about this power plant, and it's probably one of the most unsafe power plants in the entirety of the Southeast, at least according to the safety report. So we then kind of changed the focus of the video from talking about Zaporizhzhia to talking about this power plant possibly being unsafe. And one time, well, actually every single time we went out there and filmed, it was like right here on the other side of the road, so that way we weren't on the power plant's property because they had a giant sign saying you'd be trespassing if you did. Every single time, their security came out armed to the teeth and were trying to harass us to not film, although we legally could film. So it was a whole ordeal, but that's kind of what we were talking about way back then. And then the video never came out because we were never happy with the end product, and then we just scrapped the whole thing because we want to put out videos that are actually good. But yeah, that's what happened for the most part. It was a crazy thing. And also, that's kind of the story in a nutshell too, Margaret. But still, thank you so much once again for the support. And I guess this is what happens. Well, that's what happens when there is no live stream. We go around and try and do video projects that are pretty weird. But still, thank you so much once again for support, Margaret. Hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, it is time for us to move back into the Ukraine war news, starting off with our first clip of a Russian T-80 getting destroyed. And so, here's the clip. And also, the title said it's igniting the powder charges like some kind of a pirate. And we can see the bomblet being dropped. We can see another one being dropped. That's an M67 fragmentation grenade. It missed. But that's okay. One of them will hit. That one right there. Like a basketball circling the rim, blowing up in the turret, and sending the thing sky high. Amazing grace. That thing is toasty. Oh, look at that. Man, that thing be cooking. Wait, let him cook. And that thing is cooking. It looks like they're now speeding up the footage just to show us the burning tank. But clear proof that the T-80 was lost.
You know, some people shouldn't be allowed to cook. But the Ukrainians, they shall never be restricted from cooking.
Man, the Ukrainians...
Proverbs.
Man, the Ukrainians live by the saying, anyone can cook. And they do. They be cook. Oh, it's gone. This thing, that crater right there is where the tank was. There's the turret. There's a part of the front of the hull. And then there's just some odd pieces laying around. Man. It's like a Lego set that you threw on the floor. And there's a track link. And that's the end of the clip, but nice to see another T-80 getting destroyed. Moving on from that clip and into the next one, we once again got to see ATACMS being launched. It's the same clip, but just included a little bit of the intro. But moving on from that, and on to our next one, we also got to see a pretty near miss, about as near as you can get, because it actually hit the guy. But here it is. A bullet got caught in the bottom of his magazine that was shot at him. There it is. Pretty
That's
lucky.
pure luck.
He's shaking a little bit. I would be shaking too. I would be terrified and pissing my pants right now. But that is pretty impressive. And you can see the little spring in there that makes sure to push the bullets up towards the top of the magazine. But with that, we're now going to be moving on from that little clip. Pretty crazy close call. And moving on from that, we got to see a Ukrainian FPV drone hit a motorcycle today. When you see the Russian motorcycle, we can see the drone. And poof, hit right at the back of the motorcycle. First time we've ever seen that. Probably not the last. Now it's been shown that it can be done. But we also saw another interesting picture of a Nona that apparently had a premature detonation in the barrel, which turned the barrel of the mortar into an Elmer Fudd gun. You know, where like the little pieces of the barrel are like shredded like a banana peel. That's what we're seeing right there. And also the turret popped off as well, probably showing that there was a lot more damage than we're seeing out here from the outside. But love to see it, and great to know that the Nona is no mo. But moving on from that, we are now going to be moving on to our last bit of Location Unknown news, which was the Russian casualty report, which was also quite interesting today.
Oh, they got one Bobcat. Nice, but I'm telling you, I love to see the losses are staying high in every other category consistently every single day. That's wild.
It's wild. It's absolutely crazy. And we also saw that 800 Russian soldiers were wiped out. That's an entire battalion tactical group in one day. 20 armored personnel carriers were destroyed, along with 22 supply trucks, 14 tanks, 26 artillery pieces, 11 drones, 2 cruise missiles, and the Bobcat skid steer. All in all, today, once again, was an incredibly high day of losses for the Russian army, showing that the offensive at Avdiivka is still failing miserably. Moving on from that, and out of the Location Unknowns, it's now time for us to try and scoot through the news around Ukraine as best we can. Moving on to our first clip, we got to see an FPV drone destroy a Russian excavator along the Kursk Oblast. It appears to be digging some kind of a trench, and now it'll become a part of the features. We can see the little excavator right down there. Poof! It got hit. It's done for. The construction workers get paid by the hour, not by the bomblet. Moving on from that and into our next little bit of news, we also got to see a captured Russian BTR-82 in service with Ukrainian forces in the northern area around Chernihiv today. We got to see 2 pictures of this. It's in service with the 119th Independent Brigade of the TDF, and we can see that right there. Pretty cool. Pretty sick if you ask me. Moving on from that and into the northeastern area, we also got to see near Kremenna today that a Ukrainian soldier apparently likes Call of Duty, and he got himself a COD loadout. When you see right here, the Heckler & Koch MG5 machine gun with a Hensoldt ZO 4x30 optic. Pretty impressive. Supplied
Sounds
by
expensive.
Germany. And he also has a little Skull Mask S2, or as well.
Skull Maskus.
Man, Skull Maskus 2. That sounds like a city, man. Skull Maskus 2. But anyways, very cool to see. I like to see his little loadout. He's got a pretty sick little kit right there. But moving on from Kremenna and down into the area of Bakhmut, we, from what we understand, haven't seen a lot of frontline advances in Bakhmut. And to make sure that we get that correct, we can see that the Russians have moved maybe like 20 meters over the past few days right there. So not really any big frontline changes, but we did see some clips of Ukrainian artillery firing onto the city of Bakhmut and wreaking havoc. And the music is wreaking havoc to my neural synapses, which just got fried from that sound. But we can see here the city of Bakhmut and the Ukrainian artillery coming on in, peppering up the Russians like some kind of a hamburger that has no seasoning. By God, someone get that thing some ketchup. But we can see here the MLRS slamming down into the city and making sure to wipe it on out quite nicely. Hopefully hitting some Russian forces, although we couldn't see that too well on film. Moving on from that clip and on into our next one, we also got to see the Russians, of course, doing their usual insurance appraisals on their position after it was bombed. Here's the clip.
Ай, ребята, все имущество, блядь, сгорело наше. Сука, попало, блядь. Не спасли, не уберегли, господи. Сука. Жалко-то как все, блядь.
9 октября, 200-я бригада.
Well, that dirt bike's done.
Погорели мы маленько, погорели.
Бакалили.
Враги нас сожгли.
Рагилы сеспли.
Все имущество нажитое у нас погорело.
There's just not much
Остались
left.
только печки и трубы. Дырки
Uh-oh.
горели.
He got the power generator. That's why he sounds so drained of energy.
Много чего сгорело. Много чего.
Shovel's
Oh,
done.
little sad shovel.
Oh, look, an old
Всё
Soviet
имущество
shovel.
погорело. Дом успели отстоять, успели крышу затушить.
Well, you see, they have
Еда
buckets.
погорела. Склад с водой, с едой сгорел.
At least they have buckets.
Ну, может, что-то там еще под шифером осталось. Будем сейчас все остынет разбирать. Пострадали мы крепко.
Quite a warming video, I have to say, and beautiful to see another Russian outpost toasted. Moving on from that and into our next clip, we also got to see the Freedom of Russia Legion taking out some Russian forces along the southern flank of the Bakhmut battlefield. The Freedom of Russia Legion has a contingent that is in the area of Bakhmut that is currently engaged in the fighting along with other units like the 3rd Brigade and also the Fighting 93rd. Well, you see that drone coming on in right here. But you see a group of T-72 tanks wanted to hide in forest strips. And the Freedom of Russia Legion is about to strip them of their privileges. We can't say what kind of privileges, but they're the fun kind of privileges that let you do everything else. And look at that. They're hiding in the trees. Not too well. And you see their artillery coming on in, hitting them, and apparently hitting so hard it knocked the pixels clean out of the camera.
Man, they're trying to be sneaky, but they just can't quite pull it off.
Man, they try and be sneaky like that Pokari Shwet.
Man, that's like the orcs. They be sweating.
Man, the orcs do be sweating. They be going, oh God! But anyways,
Wait a minute. Go back to that last frame. They're like showing the smoking gun, like on this one. Like, watch this.
yeah,
I love it.
Man.
Real creative.
I like it. Big respect, blade. But moving on from that and on out of the area of Bakhmut, we're now going to be moving on down to the southern front. We've already covered Avdiivka earlier in the stream, so if you want to see that, just go back to earlier. But moving on from that, we also got to see the 43rd Artillery destroying some Russian forces down here with the HIMARS. La 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 la. Copyright. But we can see here, whew, and there goes the Grad, and the Ukrainians are very glad to see it.
That's a pretty big explosion, whatever that was.
It was pretty big because it was full of rockets. Moving on from that into the area of Novopil, we can see the, oh, well, sorry, that's actually the ATACMS firing early. So we'll skip that and move on further down into the area around Polohi, where we got to see a Tor surface-to-air missile system being destroyed. These are actually around 30 million apiece. They're twice as expensive as a Pantsir, and it's about to get lost right there. Here comes the second one. A buoy. And here comes the third one. A buoy hitting right on top of it and blowing it away. Very nice. But moving on from that and on into our next clip, we also got to see the muddy roads that are still ahead of Ukrainian forces in the south, which are probably ending offensive actions for everyone in the area. Here's the clip. There you go. There's your songs for the day. But we can see the road, and it's in pretty bad shape.
That is so nasty. I don't know if this who makes this vehicle again? I know it's Rochelle, but which country does it come from?
Canada.
Canada. I've heard some complaints about those vehicles, but I wonder how they handle the mud.
Who knows? I mean, if they handle the roads as well as their armor handles an RPG, probably not that well. But with that, We are now going to be moving on from that clip and into the next one near Nove, where we got to see a Russian Mista S being destroyed. These things are about $3.5 million, so sorely missed by the Russians, and also they don't have a lot of them. I think they had about 300 of them in service, and they've lost a lot of them over the course of this war. The bomblet hit on the first strike to the top of the turret, and it immediately detonated the ammunition stores inside, which are now burning. We don't know if the crew was able to bail out or not. Who will win? $3.5 million SPG or the Chad $2,000 drone carrying a $67 hand grenade? The answer is about $2,067 will win against the $3.5 million. Oh, man, the beacons are lit. China calls for aid, but we can see that thing toasting on up out there. That's a $3.5 million fire. You gotta appreciate these things when they come around. And JT said, no bailing out of that. I don't know, man. With how the Russians can bail out of everything else, they might be like Harry Houdini. They might just be able to skedaddle. But we can see the next Mista S being hit right here as well. So another $3.5 million possibly being lost. And just y'all's quote of the day from the live chat, now I want pancakes, anonymous viewer. I like that quote.
Don't we all? We all want pancakes.
Now I want pancakes. Man, what the hell's wrong with you, man? Now you got me distracted.
That fine Canadian maple syrup. Grade A.
That nice, fine Canadian syrup. But we can see the Mista S, the second one, blowing up. Oh, wow, that thing's spread itself out. Man, that thing took all of its weight, spread it out, burned on the ground for 3 days. But moving on from that, absolutely wonderful to see 2 of them get destroyed. And we're now going to be moving on out of the area of the southern front and on towards Snake Island, because we actually got a little clip today showing a Ukrainian I think it's a GUR or GRU soldier just hanging out on Snake Island.
Hey, Heroam Slava.
Heroam Slava. Very nice to see these guys just chilling on the island of the snakes. But moving on from that, it is now time for us to quickly shoot down into Israel and cover the news there. So far in the northern area of Israel, we've seen that Israeli troops have been preparing for a raid in the area of Beit Rima. And they shot out a power transformer to create a blackout so that way they could have the element of surprise in the raid. We can see them firing at the transformer right here. And soon it'll go out. Right there. And then the raid is ready to commence.
That's strange that transformer really didn't make a sound when it blew up.
Yeah, it just kind of shut off. It just went, oh, okay, and then just turned off. But moving on from northern Israel and down into the area of Tel Aviv, we also saw the Iron Dome system intercepting some roqueta in the area.
Yo! 3, 3. יו.
Of course, the Iron Dome is still doing its job, and hopefully we'll see the Iron Beam, or some video footage of the Iron Beam work here soon. And now, moving on into the Gaza Strip, and we have 3 clips we'll be talking about, in particular with the hospital, which we'll get to in a minute. We did see, however, that the Israeli Air Force continued to conduct strikes on Hamas bases and headquarters around the area of the entire strip, and we got to see this put out by the Israeli Air Force today. I see one building being hit. We can see a second building here being hit and completely collapsing. We see another building being hit and collapsing as well. And we see that the Israelis always use enough explosive power to always completely level the buildings that they're going for. We can see that the foundations simply just don't survive the explosion and the entire building collapses. And so with that, that's seeing that clip right there. Very interesting to see the Israeli Air Force, of course, conducting its airstrikes. And now it's time for us to change our tone a little bit to talk about a situation that has been very controversial today and has raised a lot of eyebrows around the world. Of course, we are talking about the hospital attack that occurred inside of northern Gaza. Before we get into this, I have to make a little bit of a disclaimer. We are going to be presenting the videos that we have. We're, of course, pro-Israel, but we are going to be trying not to take a side and just look at the video footage as it is. There are currently accusations from both sides being thrown around. The Palestinians and Hamas say that the Israelis conducted the attack. The Israelis say that it was something that Hamas or the Palestinians had conducted instead. From what we understand, some kind of an explosion occurred at a hospital in the northern Gaza Strip and has ended up possibly killing people inside of the hospital, maybe even hundreds or dozens of them. We're not entirely sure because an exact death count has not been made at the moment. Of course, it is going to be a little bit of a tough thing to cover, and some people have actually said in our live chat to not cover it. The issue is, however, is that would be a miss for us to call ourselves a news channel and then to not cover things that would be considered news. And this is certainly something that is newsworthy, considering that it was a large hospital that appears to have been directly attacked today in an explosion. Of course, we're not going to say who it was attacked by. We're just going to show you all the footage, and I'm going to kind of say who it looks like maybe hit the hospital, but here is the footage. We're going to be starting off with our first bit of footage, which is coming from right before the hospital explosion. So here's the clip. This is apparently from the Israeli side of the Gaza Strip. We can see the camera looking southwards, and we can see a large Hamas rocket barrage beginning at the beginning of the clip. See all the missiles, of course, taking a very widespread, very inaccurate. And we can see the missiles' propellants fading right there. And then we can see an explosion over there. It fades out really quickly, and that's the end of it. So far in this clip, we see that there was a Hamas rocket attack happening near the same time that the hospital exploded. So fairly interesting to see. It appears that there may be a slight correlation in between the two, but one thing was very certain in this clip, we didn't see a missile veer off course. And just to show you all the rocket spread again, we did not see a rocket veer off course that could have gone in that direction, at least from how the rocket motors are working. It may have been that one, maybe, because we can see that all of them are flying in a fairly straight path. This one here, its motor cuts out. It's not really following on the trajectory that the other ones are, and we can see that the few times its motor works before it fizzles out, we can see it's kind of taking a trajectory that's taking it this way, over to where the explosion happened. A few seconds pass after that rocket motor dissipates, and then we see the explosion over here. And so in this clip, it looks like it may have possibly been a Hamas rocket motor that misfired that led to one of their rockets actually flying over into the area of the hospital and then exploding. However, there's still an issue with these video clips and what happened. From what we understand, the explosion was incredibly large that occurred at the hospital, and these rockets and their rocket motors appear to have had such a small amount of propellant behind them, it's highly unlikely that the explosive yield would have been big enough to produce the explosion we saw at the hospital. So moving on from that clip and on into our next one, we also saw another video of the rocket barrage that we saw just a moment ago, but from another angle. And here's the clip. We can see what appears to be one of the rockets possibly firing, or the Iron Dome more so, trying to intercept one of the Hamas rockets. We can see that right there. We can see it explode, of course, blowing up whatever it was, the rocket or the mortar that just hit. And then we see the explosion at the hospital right there. Interestingly enough, however, in this clip, we can see that the explosion actually isn't that large. We can see the hospital has been illuminated by the explosion, and the hospital spans from about this end of the screen over to about right here. The explosion appears to only encompass the central part of the hospital, and then quickly dissipates. The explosion not being that large, it does not look like the normal 1,000 or 2,000 pound bombs that the Israelis have been using so far in airstrikes against the Gaza Strip. We see a small fire beginning to burn on the hospital as well. And we see it burning, but sadly the smoke and the flames don't really allow us to get a good view of the hospital in this clip to see exactly what happened. But we can see some kind of a large fire has broken out in front of the hospital. We see the fire continuing to burn, but unfortunately we don't really see a lot beyond this point of the hospital, more so just the smoke plume from the explosion and the fire at the hospital. We then see the camera quickly pan away, and then we see another Hamas rocket attack occurring in the background. With that, we're now going to be moving on from that clip, where we once again saw Hamas continuing a rocket barrage after the hospital had been hit, and then watching another third clip. This one appears to be one that would show the clearest the failed rocket that appears to may have possibly hit the hospital. And once again, we're not saying that this is definitive. It just appears that the coincidence of the Hamas rocket barrage occurring almost at the same time that the hospital was hit or blew up, it's a very interesting coincidence. But when you see the Hamas firing off their unguided rockets, we can see one rocket over here, clearly with its motor still on, flying over to the side. The motor cuts out, and then we see the explosion over here on the very side of the screen, right at the last moment. Well, hell, we can't even really see it right there well at all. But from that clip, at least from this angle, it shows that there may have been a Hamas rocket that veered off course with its motors still on or off. We can't really tell that clearly, and that may have been what caused the explosion at the hospital. But there's still many questions revolving around these videos and around what happened in the hospital that still leads us to not really have a clear statement. We can't really say who did it. It appears that it may have been a Hamas rocket that veered off course and ended up blowing up onto the hospital by just random chance. There is still the odd chance that it may have been an Israeli airstrike. There is some evidence that would support that and also deny that. The Israelis did state a while ago, a few days ago, that the Palestinians had around 24 hours to evacuate a large hospital in a similar area before they were to bomb it. That was, of course, met with condemnation by really everyone around the world, and then the Israelis backed out of that plan. We then saw from then forward that the Israelis have not attacked the hospital. And also, from what we understand, we did not hear any reports or eyewitness accounts saying that there was the sounds of Israeli Air Force aircraft flying overhead in the area. Of course, it was nighttime, and usually Israeli aircraft are flying incredibly high up, around 20 to 30,000 feet up, so it begs the question if you would even be able to hear the jets flying at that altitude if they were in the area. So once again, that doesn't really lead us to a definitive answer on who really attacked the hospital. The Israeli Air Force aircraft may have been active in the area, but we won't really be able to tell because it's nighttime. And of course, we can't look up and see the jet streams of the aircraft at that altitude at that time. So, going off of all of this, to give you all the concise summary, there are two theories ongoing at the moment. One, it was an Israeli Air Force airstrike that hit the hospital without any warning. It may have been accidental. It may have been deliberate. The second theory that is ongoing at the moment is that it is a Hamas rocket that veered off course due to a faulty motor, and then it ended up landing in front of the hospital, exploding, and then ended up collapsing it. Those are currently the two running theories right now, and we're not going to make a statement about which one is possibly correct or incorrect. Either one of them right now has about as much viability as the other. And while we support Israel on this channel, we do want to make sure that we are unbiased in our way that we report facts and information, because all of these videos, while looking quite compelling, they don't really give us that clear of a story still, and there's still a lot of questionability as to what really happened at that hospital. So we're going to leave it up to y'all. Instead of me giving y'all the answer, like most news companies give y'all nowadays, I'm going to let y'all come up with the answer. Who did it? Israel or Hamas? It will be up to y'all instead. But moving on out of the news that we got in Israel today, it's now time for us to move on up into Kyiv and cover the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 601 of the war. And so,
I want a speech. Give me a speech.
Without further ado, here is the speech. It's probably one of the shortest ones of the war as well.
I wish you health.
Oh, no, we ain't having that. No. There we go. All right, here's the speech.
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці, українки. провів засідання Ставки, важливі доповіді командувачів. Дякую кожному воїну, кожній нашій бригаді, які міцно тримають позиції. Авдіївка, Бахмутський напрямок, Мар'їнка, Шахтарський напрямок, і Куп'янськ, і Запорізький напрямок. Молодці хлопці, дякую тим, хто потужно знищує логістику та бази окупантів на нашій землі. Є результати. Я дякую деяким нашим партнерам. Ефективна зброя, як ми і домовлялись. Маємо результати в нашому просуванні вперед. Результат штурмових дій наших хлопців – це і ключові новини нашої держави. Щодня, щотижня Україна саме потребує таких результатів. Щодня, щотижня треба зберігати ініціативу. Я дякую всім, хто саме так діє. Кожен пройдений кілометр, кожна подолана лінія оборони окупанта. Все це має значення. Постійність наших результатів – це постійність підтримки України світом. Була доповідь на Ставці щодо захисту берегів Чорного моря, Дунайського регіону, захист людей, захист портів, захист нашого експорту. Вдячний усім, хто працює заради цього. Окремо обговорили міжнародну політику, наявні зміни. Урядовці доповідали, розвідка також. Викликів багато, але якими б не були загрози, наша відповідь – це наша сила, наша єдність – захищати Україну та державні інтереси, бути в обороні або з обороною, допомагати, дбати про тих, хто поруч, знайти своє місце у спільній роботі народу – це важливо. Обов'язково переможемо. Слава Україні!
And Hiram Slava.
And Rom Slava. And hell, I didn't even have my microphone on there. But with that, that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky, and that is the end of the halftime show as well. We are now going to be moving on into the second part of the stream, a fun part, an interesting part, where we get to talk to all of y'all about what has been going on today, yesterday, over the whole war, what may be going on in the future. Really, anything y'all want to talk about. Hell, we don't even have to talk about the war. We can talk about anything. But with that, take it away, Matthew.
I gotta say that I do enjoy a good speech from Zelensky, and he gives some really good ones, like the long form speeches. But I like the straight to the point ones, like the minute and 50-second, 2-minute long speeches. Those are actually pretty good and straight to the point.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I would have to be honest.
You agree? You agree?
I would agree. I would be honest with
good.
you. I mean, hell, also, Matthew, get that guy, the guy that name-pad hit. I mean, that was crazy stuff, but that's what distracted me right there. But anyways, Matthew, what do we have? What do we have up in here?
So, for our first poll of the last segment, it says there have been multiple earthquakes in Iran today, and what do you think is the cause? 52% said they are just normal earthquakes. 24% said it might be Iran nuclear test. 14% said it seems odd, maybe they're man-made, and 10% said unsure. And this is a tough one to take a side on, because if you go with one of the options like maybe man-made, you might be labeled as a conspiracy theorist. If you go with just normal earthquakes, you might be labeled as naive. But I will say the timing of these earthquakes, which were magnitude 5.0 or higher, it's kind of odd. I think a couple of them, maybe 2 or 3, happened today, and I'm not sure how frequent the seismic activity is in the area. I would imagine it's probably more frequent than usual. But it seems a little odd that so many happen in rapid succession like that. With these tensions heating up so fast, it almost seems a little bit weird to me. So I'm going to say unsure, just because I don't want to go into the conspiracy theory camp. But Enforcer, what say you?
Before I move on, though, Matthew, real quick, there's a whistling sound coming from your microphone. It's like some kind of a high-pitched noise that's just constantly going in the background as you talk. I don't know what's up with that. But to answer...
Who knows? I think you might have imagined that, man. I can't hear a thing.
Well, you're not hearing a thing because you're not the one hearing your microphone. I mean,
Does anybody else hear this?
I don't know.
There's no high-pitched noise in here.
I mean, like I was hearing, I was like, damn, this is hurting my ears. It sounded like I had tinnitus. But anyways, moving on into the Iran situation, the seismic activity, from what we can understand, is kind of normal, at least in the area it's happening. From what I understand, it's happening in western Iran, and we've actually seen earthquakes happening throughout the war in Ukraine and western Iran somewhat regularly. And a lot of people are saying they didn't hear that. I don't know. Maybe I just heard
Man, it's that Havana beam.
Man, I'm getting a headache. I'm feeling kind of queasy. Let me sit down a little bit. It's probably me just burning out and my ears were like whining. That's actually happening a lot lately where I just sit down somewhere and like tinnitus happens, where my ears just start ringing. I don't know what it is. But anyways, moving on from that, I think the seismic activity is kind of normal. May just be a pretty active day earthquake-wise. I don't really think it's anything out of the norm or crazy. But some people have been saying it may be indicative of a nuclear test, which who knows? If it's indicative of a nuclear test, I'm sure someone's going to come out and say something about that officially, at least from the U.S. government's end. But who knows? I'm just going to go with it's probably just normal seismic activity, just a coincidence that it's a large amount of it over a small amount of time. And so with that, I hope that does address that poll fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
Also, OG45 says the Havana syndrome, not the Havana beam. So there you go. It's not the Havana beam.
Man,
but
you sit there, not with my Havana Ray, and you shoot them, and then they have like no cars, no gas, no economy. Like, they just go to nothing. But anyways, with that.
Yeah, they actually never solved that. Like, they never figured out what was causing that. And I think they chalked it up to like a psychological syndrome or something. Like they were imagining it in their minds, and it never really occurred. It's kind of weird. Like people's brains getting mixed up and saying it's some kind of microwave beam getting shot at the embassies. Anything's possible, but I have a feeling that was probably a little bit more than a psychological, problem. Like these people just didn't go nuts out of the blue. I know there's some people that think that the government agents and stuff are crazy, and some of them probably are, but I don't know about that Havana junk. That seems a little bit far-fetched. But anyways, moving on to our second poll. It says Iran says, quote unquote, flames of bombs will consume Israel, end quote. The embassy also says time is up for Israel. And what are your thoughts? 41% said Iran is just talking up a storm. 37% said Iran will join the war soon. 18% said let's wait and see. And 5% said unsure. And on this one, I am pretty confident that Iran will join the war soon. I'm not trying to be a fearmonger here, but Iran is getting very, very heated. Iran is not like the West, and that's been made very clear. They've been helping out Russia fight its war in Ukraine, which is essentially against the West, and I would not put it past Iran to get involved. Also, we don't know if they have nuclear weapons, which would put Iran in a very good spot to, go offensive against the West, because we wouldn't want to attack a nuclear-powered country. That wouldn't be a wise thing to do. And, I'm going to go with the 37%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say it was mostly talk. Iran always loves to talk, as you all know, but at the same time, it's probably talk that's going to be backed up with small action through continuously supporting or instigating Hamas and Hezbollah, which the Iranians are heavily tied into. That's probably what's going to happen, but I don't really think it's going to create anything major on an official Iranian level. Because we all have to remember, the Iranians are pretty backwards as a country. Their navy almost consists entirely of speedboats. Like, the speedboats you see out of the lake, if you ever go to the lake. That's what their navy is. Their air force is from the 70s at best. Everything they have is pretty ancient, and also their military is, from what we understand, poorly trained and mostly conscripts, worse off than Russia's. So if they were to try and do anything, it would probably go quite poorly. I bet they understand that, especially against a nation like Israel. If they somehow ended up having a ground conflict, it probably would not end well for Iran. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, at least in my opinion, because I think they're most likely just running their mouths as usual. That's what most people do. They hate America. They just end up running their mouths, but they don't really have the ability to act on what they say. But with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and with that being said, we are fresh out of poll questions. So we're moving back into our Super Chat questions. And up first, we have a $20 donation from Spam Hoffen. And thank you very much, Spam, for that support. And we must say that the Enforcer does love spam. He says, got to get rid of my Google Play balance before it expires. And it's hard to be awake for the stream. It starts at 4 a.m. in Austria. And live chat question, please. And going back to sleep now. Have fun.
Hey, and hello to Austria. A very cool country. Very beautiful place, too. My mom wants to go to Austria. Oh, Steyr! Steyr! Hey! Matthew, it's the promised land. It's Steyr!
What's that supposed to mean?
Like, the Steyr Firearms Company.
Oh, like Steyr Og.
Yeah! Oh, my lord. I didn't know that there was a Steyr in Austria. We got to check this place out. What's it look like? Ah, yes. I can already see a failed
like the
painter.
Irish are here. turn back around. It's the Irish.
Yeah, one
Guinness.
Your stick's not even on the ground, man. But anyways, man, this is actually not that bad of a place. Kind of quiet, but still, it's really pretty. I like it. Man, it has a real like 18th century feel to it. Although some of these buildings do look like they were rebuilt probably in like the 50s or the 60s, but still
Reminds me of Tallinn, Estonia a little bit.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? It does. It doesn't look that bad. It's really quiet though, and like, it's 2022 in September. That may be the reason why. But that is still really nice place, Steyr. I mean, they also went Museum Arbeitswelt. What is this? Steyr? Wait, hang on.
Bodies
Oh,
of work.
look at this. They got cars.
That's a Beamer.
Oh, look at this one. I like this one. That one's cool.
That is pretty cool. Are these all old BMWs or something?
I don't really know. That looks like a Bentley.
Maybe. It's not exactly Austrian.
What is this? This is actually pretty nice looking too. And then they got
Looks like a Mercedes.
Dude, the Russians get nightmares when they see this thing. Russians weep before it. Watch it steal your tank. But man, like, I guess this is just a like museum about industry because they have like cars, some industrial equipment. Pretty cool. I mean, an MG08, the Schwarzlos, a pretty cool machine gun. But man, I like this museum. Pretty nice place. Like, it looks pretty posh. I like it. But anyways, moving on from Steyr, because Steyr is only part of the attraction of Austria. The big attractions that my mom wants to see is Vienna, Austria, and also the Alps inside of Austria. My mom, for some reason, thinks that the Alps in Austria is prettier than the Alps in Italy or Switzerland. Don't know why. She's just kind of biased that way. I don't really know. I haven't really asked why. But she thinks that's the case, and I bet it may be true. I mean, I think the Alps looks like the Alps wherever you are, even in France. It probably looks the same. But still, really nice place, beautiful place. And also, I hate to hear it, and we always get requests from all of our European viewers, Spamhofen, to move the stream a little bit earlier. So that way it's easier for American viewers to watch, and also that would make it a lot more difficult for European viewers to watch. Or some people ask for us to push the stream back later, and most of the Europeans do, from instead of 10 p.m. Eastern Time to like 11 p.m. Eastern Time or 12 p.m. Eastern Time. But the problem is we wouldn't be able to survive at that point. So, with that, sadly we can't move the stream around, but I love to know, Spamhofen, that you're here on stream. Although it's 4 a.m. in Austria, I gotta respect your commitment to being here tonight, and I gotta thank you once again for the support as well, because folks like you help to keep this channel running. And also, let me refresh the map because it's keeping that marker up and it's driving me crazy. But not now. But I gotta say, respect. And also, man, apparently something so bad happened in Bagdagstein that they had to create Bad Hofgestein. Because apparently things went so bad they had to create a separate village. But anyways, thank you so much once again, Spamhofen, for the support. I hope that does address that further well. And thank you so much once again for being here tonight and also being from Europe. I think that's really cool. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Duncan VR, who puts in a 30 Australian. And thank you very much, Duncan, for that support as always. He says, Bamuba. Thanks for mentioning Baba Pancakes. I got Supreme Pizza with pineapple for Matt. Man, I don't know about pineapple and Supreme. That's a little bit wild, man. He says, Bamu, quack. Hello, spam. No, I don't. No, quack. I'm around Lenley Point, New South Wales. Look it up. I have waterfront. Oh, wow. Moo, quack, bah. Let's see what we got cooking.
Lenley Point, New South Wales. Oh, where is this? What the? Oh, it's in Sydney. Oh, that's cool.
I thought you were talking about like Wales, like really like Wales.
Oh, no. New South Wales is that part of southern Australia.
Damn, that's a new Wales, man. I was thinking about the old Wales.
Dude, this is Wales 2.0. This is the new and improved Wales. You got to get with your facts, man. Come on. Man, I'm about to quit watching this show. But anyways, where in the world is this? There's the Sydney Opera House, world famous. So you're like, what, 7 miles from that? 4 miles from that? That's actually not that far. And that's also crazy. Let's take a look at this place. What does it look like on this bridge? What's the view that you possibly have? Well, that's actually really nice. That's really, really high end. I like this.
Duncan's living it up over there in Sydney Harbour.
Man, Duncan be living it up. And you can also see downtown Sydney from there, too. There it is. Way out there.
You can almost see Nemo from here.
Man. Okay. That's it. But anyways, thank you so much for the support, Duncan VR. And geschlecht verleichman. And thank you for throwing in the traditional animal noises, of course. And also, really cool to know that you're one of the Leaf Spring Army members from not just Australia, but Sydney. Specifically Sydney. That is really cool. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support, Duncan, and helping this channel to keep on running. You're one of the folks who help us to keep the lights on, and if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to take a look at your home city of Sydney, Australia. Really cool. And thank you so much once again for the support and helping the channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Rob Horvath, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Rob, for that support.
Hey!
If I'm not mistaken, I believe that said on YouTube's chat, the first support that you've ever put in. And if it is, huge shout out to you, and thank you for helping to keep our operation running and us delivering the news. And Rob says, keep up the awesome work, guys, and question from the chat.
Thank you so much for the support, Rob Horvath. And thank you once again for enjoying our work. It means a lot to us that folks enjoy the work and also that folks support our work so that way we can keep it going. And I got to thank you so much for appreciating it that greatly that you found it worthwhile to actually support. And so with that, thank you so much once again. And we will make sure to get a live chat in honor of that super chat. And also, if that is your first time supporting the channel like YouTube's saying it is, thank you so much for going out of your way to support the channel and help it to keep on running. And with that, let's get a live chat.
And the live chat goes to Barry Badrinth, who says, how the heck is Ukraine artillery getting so precise lately?
Ukrainian artillery is probably getting very precise lately because the artillerists are once again upping their A game. I haven't really seen Ukrainian artillery performance suffer throughout the war, but if you've seen it and it's improving, it's probably because their artillerists are probably getting well seasoned if they're new. But usually Ukrainian artillerists are actually veteran artillerists. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least from how I could explain it. And thank you so much once again for sponsoring that live chat and also helping this channel to keep on running, Rob. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and long live the Leaf Spring Army.
All right, the next one goes to Derek Rosefan as well as BC Skyman, who each put in a $10 super chat without comments on these. And thank you very much, Derek and BC, for putting in that support and helping to keep us running. And in honor of those two, I see a ton of people asking for information about the U.S. embassies in Lebanon and also the other embassies as well. I will say, from what I've been able to find, it looks like a ton of disinfo is running around rampantly on the internet right now, from newspapers to Twitter to everywhere. The actual official report right now is it looks like the U.S. Embassy has the situation under control. There are apparently rioters, or if you want to call them protesters, whatever you want to call them. There's people outside the embassy causing a ruckus, but they haven't actually overrun the embassy. There doesn't appear to be an immediate threat of the embassy actually being attacked or taken over, but obviously those things can change pretty quickly, so we'll keep a sharp eye on it, but it looks like it's okay for the moment. And with that being said, we're moving on to our next super chat, which goes to Gerald Mansfield, who puts in a 20, and he says, thanks for the show.
And thank you so much, Gerald, for enjoying the show and being here with us tonight and also supporting us to help us to keep it rolling. Folks like you who support the channel mean a lot to us because it's the only way we're able to provide the bread and butter behind the scenes to make sure that we're able to keep the thing going. And so thank you so much once again, Gerald, for enjoying the show and finding it worthwhile to support. And so thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Leo Dominguez. And I'm sorry for butchering that last name, but I do not know how to say it for the life of me. But Leo says, Leo actually puts in a 10, and then he says, done. Pizza and coffee fund. Done. Donation. Done.
Don. You're calling me a Don. I have to thank you, Leo Don, for getting the pizza and the coffee done. That's why my kidneys have failed me and I was in a Moscow hospital done. But I shall continue to make my kidneys fail on the pizza, coffee, and ham and cheddar done. And thank you so much for the super chat done, for helping this channel to keep on running done. Because if it wasn't for you, Leo done, we wouldn't be able to keep the channel running done. Please release my assets. I'm poor.
So with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And thank you once again for helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Don said, my people may starve. Bliat, Don. But I do have a G-Wagon. Would you like to take a ride in my Lambo? And then he said, could you put my son in charge of the yogurt company, please? And Putin said, yes, let him make yogurt. Yes.
Don, my freaking kidneys can't handle it, Don.
dude, Don, like, Kadyrov is sitting there, and he's like,
I will have more ham and cheddar, Don.
and his kidneys are inside of him going, please, please, don't do it. Don't do it, please. And then he's like,
Give me another one, Don.
and they're like, no. But anyways,
And
with
then he
that,
finally realized, after all of the years I've been eating ham and cheddar, and my religion hasn't allowed it the whole time I've been eating ham.
It's not even halal, Don.
but anyways, we're on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $10 super chat from Siri, and thank you very much, Siri, for that support. They said, thanks for the excellent work, you two, and a shout out to the gentleman who proposed an evening of Enforcer and Chill, LOL. Huh? And happy thoughts from Oslo, and love to LSA Vidmus. Witches.
Witches. Thank you so much once again for the support, Siri. Enforcer and Chill. Don't know how I feel about that, but it happened. So with that, thank you so much for enjoying the work, helping the channel to keep on running, and a big shout out to that guy, because I don't know what you were thinking, but apparently it went over well. So good on you, man, and keep it up. And also, really cool to hear you're from Oslo, Siri. And of course, we have a lot of Norwegian and Swedish viewers that watch this channel. One of you, and of course, hopefully you'll be coming back. One of you is actually serving in the Swedish Armed Forces right now, and actually joined because, from what I remember, they said they joined because of the show and us talking about the war in Ukraine. And so hopefully they're having a fun time. Hopefully we'll get to see him again soon. But really cool to know you're from Oslo. And also, let's check out the beautiful city of Oslo. Mama Pizza. Dang, this place is actually pretty new looking.
It's Oslo, but it's not slow.
Man, call it Oslo without the slow. It looking good. I gotta say, this place is really clean, and I like the little tram tracks. Because I like trams. They're actually pretty neat. But still, thank you so much once again for the support, Siri, and helping the channel to keep on running. It is folks like you who help to keep this channel possible. And I gotta thank everyone who's watching tonight from Norway for being here, and everyone from Europe, really, because I know it must take a lot to be able to get up that early in the morning and watch this show, because usually when I get up that early in the morning every day, I'm hardly even physically here. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And also, Lauren, I know that Oslo is not in Sweden, it's Norwegian, but we largely throw the Swedish and Norwegian viewers kind of into the same clump along with the Finns, because they're kind of like our Scandinavian viewers, just in general. They're all from the Scandinavian cultural group, so that's why we kind of throw them together. But still, with that, thank you so much once again for support, Siri. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and we've got a $10 super chat from Samuel Langstons, and thank you very much, Samuel, very much for that support. He says, I've been watching your streams almost from the beginning, and if the United States went into Israel, it would just cause more conflict from people that would just want to come here or come there and kill Americans.
And I thank you for the support, and I would have to agree with you, Mr. Langston, that it probably will cause a little bit more strife. But the thing is, however, is that we have to support our interests and our allies. And we could have, of course, said that as well about Ukraine. Supporting Ukraine will cause further strife, and it has. But we do have to stand up for the right thing. We also have to stand up for our side of things. Because if we don't, we'll end up losing everything. And so there's a lot on the line, especially in the Middle East right now. And so if we have to, we'll have to do it again. But what's the thing that always causes strife and ends up having people wanting to kill Americans? Well, they want to kill Americans already. The thing is that we usually end up giving them the ability to kill Americans. Like, for example, in Iraq, when we invaded Iraq in 2003, we ended up just disbanding the Iraqi army, and we didn't have enough soldiers inside of the country to actually police the abandoned Iraqi bases. And that's how a lot of the insurgents that would end up attacking the U.S. forces inside of Iraq for about the next decade or so, That's how a lot of them got the weapons, because no one was guarding the weapons in the Iraqi bases. So whenever anyone hated the Americans enough, they would just walk in, grab an RPG or an AK, they'd leave, and they would attack the Americans the next day. And then the response we would give would usually anger people enough that more people would join them. They'd go grab the weapons that were still left in the armory, and they'd come back and attack the Americans. And it went on and on like that. As long as we don't do something like that, and we also allow for the nation, we don't really allow a lot of American involvement in the nation building, and we kind of let the nation building naturally happen. If we end up dismantling a government, I feel like the situation will probably be better. It won't be ideal. Of course, it won't create a perfect world and a utopia, but it'll be a better situation than we've seen previously with what we've done in the Middle East and Central Asia. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, in my opinion. I would agree with you, though. Probably will create more strife, but at the same time, it's strife that's necessary, because we do have to stand up for what the United States believes in, and we also have to stand up for our allies around the world. Otherwise, what's the point of having an ally? And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that fairly well. Maybe you see my side of things, or maybe we'll agree to disagree, but that's how I see it. And thank you once again for the support and helping the channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Cliff H, who puts in the 10. And thank you, Cliff, for that support. He says, roll on LSA. And now that ATACMS are out and about, will Germany go ahead and send the Taurus? And my bets are on no, personally. I don't think Schultz is going to cross that line, because apparently in his mind, he thinks that Taurus missiles are a league different than the other ones that we've sent already, like the Scalp. I don't know why, but that is Schultz. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say maybe. Of course, Schultz is a little weird. And also the Germans have pledged a lot of support that's still not arrived yet. So even if they did pledge it, there's no chance that it may actually, well, there's a very small chance that it may actually make it to Ukraine. So going off of that, I would say possibly, but in reality, they'll probably never make it to Ukraine, even if they said they were going to send them, because a lot of stuff hasn't made it that the Germans have said was going to make it. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, Cliff H, and thank you so much once again for support and helping the channel to keep on running, because it is folks like you who make it possible, and I hope I was able to answer that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to John Bartley, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, John, for that support, and we do appreciate it very much. And he says, appreciate you both, and sent Matt an email, but hopefully you can take a question from the chat, and also about the Israeli conflict. And also, John, I did get your email. I was able to skim it real quick. And trust me, you are not the only one from that community that has had enough. We've actually had a lot of people, figuring out what this guy's antics are. And we're not going to say his name or go into it tonight, because we've gone into that plenty, and it's being dealt with in the background. But you're not the first to get sick of the guy's antics, trust me. But with that being said, thank you very much, John, for the support. And we will take a question from the chat about Israel. And this one is going to go to AF Kaplan, who says, could the incident with the Gaza hospital have been a false flag by Hamas or one of its allies?
That's a good question. It's entirely a possibility right now. That's certainly a running theory. Like every other, it is also a theory as well. We don't really know how true that idea could be. The video footage suggests that if it was a Hamas incident, it may have been an accident due to a faulty rocket whose motor misfired, and then it ended up landing on Gaza instead of inside of Israel, or being shot down by an Iron Dome. So going off of that, it's a theory. It certainly is one that we could work off of, but we still really don't know if that's the actual sequence of events that happened where it was a false flag. And it's not out of the question that it could be a false flag. False flags do happen. It's very rare though, and we have seen in the past that Hamas has had rockets blow up where they weren't supposed to blow up, and then they blame it on the Israelis. So it is entirely possible that that did happen, and it was a false flag, or it may have been a faulty rocket, or it may have actually been that the Israeli Air Force ended up bombing the hospital. We just don't really know at the moment. And once again, I have to make this quite clear. While I'm saying that the Israeli Air Force may have possibly bombed the hospital, we still support Israel, and if that did end up being the case, we would, of course, heavily condemn those actions by the Israelis, because that would be pretty damn barbaric to do something like that. But at the same time, there is still a larger situation at play that would kind of still not really change our side as far as support goes. And that's a whole other can of worms that I can't even really get into right now, because it would be like 20 minutes long. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. It's a theory among every other one. It's about as valid and equal in worth as really all of them at this point. We really have to wait and see for more information to come out to really find out what did happen there. But it's one of the theories of the many that we've seen so far. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one. Also, Sax2, I think, is saying that Air Force One just took off for Israel. And best of luck. Hopefully nothing bad happens, because the situation is very tense over there right now. It's very dangerous. And to have Air Force One land in Israel, which is only about 14 miles wide at some of its widest points, and only about 100 miles long, there's not really a lot of space that the president could land in Israel, or a lot of a safety barrier land-wise in between the president and the enemy combatants that we see right now fighting Israel. So hopefully everything goes well. Hopefully the president's safe. But with that, we are on to the next one.
Whoa, land in the middle of a war zone, Jack. Seems like a good idea. But anyways.
What do you mean they're launching missiles at us? What the hell? What the hell do you mean? They're supposed to be far away. But anyways, with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Gold818, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Gold, for that support. They said, long live Israel and long live Ukraine. And let's pray for the safety of the IDF and the Ukrainian army. They are fighting on the same team.
And I thank you so much for the support. And I'd agree. We support Israel and Ukraine, and all, of course, the armed forces of both of them. And we do wish them and pray for them to have the best of luck in the safest options possible when fighting their wars. Hopefully we'll see both of them triumph. I have a feeling that the Israelis will certainly triumph in their current situation. The Ukrainians will as well. So hopefully we'll see both of them come out well in the end. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. But thank you so much once again for support, and thank you for putting out well wishes to the IDF and the Ukrainian army. Also, Barry, refresh your YouTube, because we are at 2.2 thousand likes. I think your like count may be dated a little bit. It is way up there beyond 1.5. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Ed B, who puts in a 10 as well, and says, great job covering the explosion in Gaza. And any idea why Israel told Zelensky not to visit? And real quick, Enforcer, before you answer that one, I have a going theory here, because I actually ran a poll on Twitter about this exact question yesterday. My going theory is Israel does not want Zelensky coming to their country because Zelensky would steal the spotlight from Israel. And right now, Israel wants to get a lot of support for its country. And if Zelensky shows up, the spotlight is on Israel. So naturally, Zelensky will get that spotlight, and that might detract some support from Israel. And, of course, the Israelis are looking out for their own interest, and they want to make sure that no one jumps in the middle of it and steals their aid. You know, I feel a little bit differently about that, but I understand why Israel would feel that way. But, Enforcer, what say you?
I would largely have to agree with Matthew's assessment there. That's probably the reason why. We do have to remember that these are two countries that currently are vying for American support right now in billions of dollars, which, while it's chunk change for the United States, for Ukraine and Israel, these are incredibly large sums of money that the United States is sending out. So both of them, of course, kind of have competing interests in getting U.S. support. So that's probably the reason why. So that, thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address that well. And also, while we are at 2.2 thousand likes, and I just had a terrible voice crack, do make sure to click the like button. Would you? Because it does help us out. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
And the next one goes to S. Langston, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much for that support. They said, I've been listening to you every day when I'm at work, and I live in Missouri near a Lake City ammunition plant. It's a pretty cool factory that makes a big percentage of the ammunition for the military.
Oh, Lake City! Wait a minute! Oh my lord, hang on, let me go to Missouri. Is this in Missouri? No, that's not. That's in Florida. We need to go to Missouri.
Lake City, Missouri.
Let's see. That's not Missouri, that's Michigan. Wait a minute, did it? Oh, here we go. Is this? Oh, here it is! Lake City! Hey! Oh my lord! This is the place. Hang on, hold up. I'll be right back, y'all.
Oh, going to get a box of ammo. I know what he's doing. He's trying to see if he has some in store.
Hey, I do. I have the Lake City ammo. I have several boxes of caliber 30 ball M2 cartridges from Lake City Army Ammunition Plant. Hey! Hey, isn't that something?
Hey,
Isn't that
we
great?
basically have a piece of S. Langston's place right here.
I do. It's right here. It's pretty good ammo too for like M1 Garand's in 1903. Stuff's solid. It's Army spec as it was back in the 40s. So hey, I love the stuff. I mean, it's great. And also, that is so cool to know. It's you're right near the ammunition plant. That is really cool. And also, what is this? Oh wait, this what? Dude, this is right outside of Kansas City.
Hey, we went through there.
Yeah, we went through
sometime.
there. How come we didn't drive out here to the ammunition plant? How come?
Probably because we're in a rush to get to Colorado.
And then literally turn around and start driving back. I don't even know why we did that. But anyways, thank you so much once again for the support. And I didn't even know that the Lake City ammunition plant was out here. Like I have Lake City ammunition all over the place. I have 30 caliber cartridges for the carbine, 30 caliber cartridges, of course, 30-06 for the Garand's in 1903s. That is crazy to know that you're right near that ammunition factory. So thank you so much for the support. Thank you for being a Lee Spring Army viewer near one of my favorite ammunition plants, because I get a lot of my ammo from pretty much that plant. And also, thank you so much for the support and sharing that with us, that they make a lot of ammo for the Army. And hopefully it's good stuff, because I'm using it. So with that, thank you so much once again for support. Hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. But you absolutely hyped the hell out of me.
You did. And the next one goes to Armored Bear 365, who puts in a 10 and says, I don't know if it's been reported, but one of the countries there in the Middle East raised the flag for jihad. Anyways, long live the LSA and slow Ukraine.
And thank you for the support. And that's kind of par for the course, to be honest. At least for some of them. So I wouldn't really consider it out of sorts. It's kind of normal for the place, but still, thank you so much once again for the support. Slava Ukraine, and long live the LSA. And with that, and also me saying that, saying it's kind of common, not really out of source, I already know, some of y'all probably seen it. There are some people who come in here and they're like, I don't care what's going on in the Middle East. It's like, that is probably going to bring us closer to World War than Ukraine even did. So it's like, it's always important to expand horizons, broaden horizons a little bit, because you never know what's going to become important. That's at least how we look at it, and also it's news. But with that, we are on to the next one. And also, thank you for enjoying our news coverage there, and also sharing a little bit of info with us. And with that, on to the next one.
And there's just so many actors in the Middle East, like compared to the Ukraine war. In Ukraine, you have mainly Russia and just Ukraine, those two militaries fighting. Then you had Wagner, which was fighting. Now it's gone. You also have some other factions like the partisans and stuff fighting. But in the Middle East, you've got a bunch of states. Plus, you have factions like PMCs or terrorist groups. And all these different places have big supporters behind them, like the U.S. has Israel. And then you got Russia and China with their own places that they're supporting. There's so many moving pieces in the Middle East. That's what makes it so dangerous compared to the Ukrainian situation, that this could pop off real easy into something much larger.
Oh, and I would agree entirely. The Middle East is a very difficult thing to even cover, because it's so complicated and intricate, especially compared to the Ukraine war, on how many people are operating there, how many different factions. It's insane. And also, one thing that I think is very important to remember is that just because a lot of people think that the Middle East is a backwater place because of the U.S. intervention in Iraq, and also how a lot of people think that the Saudi Arabians' laws and their way is a little backwards, which beheading people for certain things is kind of I'd have to say a little backwards. At the same time, this is a very important strategic part of the world. It is a crossroads for Asia, Europe, Africa, really everyone in the world for the most part. This is practically the center of the earth as far as strategically one can see. And that's why it's a very important place to cover when anything goes down there, because it may start to impact everyone around the world, especially with oil prices, considering that most of the major oil producers outside of the United States and Russia, as well as Canada, are in the Middle East. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Margaret Hemsley, who puts in a 7 and says, buy your parents a thank you card from me and get the corgis their favorite snack, please. And if Ukraine wins, what will the worldwide consequences be?
Hey, and thank you so much for the support, and we will make sure to get them a gift. And we also make sure to get the dogs good treats. They love bones. And to answer that question, Matthew, can you reread the line?
Buy your parents a thank you card and get the Korgis their favorite snack. And if Ukraine wins, what will be worldwide consequences?
Worldwide consequences, the Russians will probably have a severe existential crisis from losing the war. I don't know what that'll lead to. It could lead to anything, really. That could go anywhere depending on what happens. Beyond that, however, it's not really going to mean a lot for the rest of the world. For China, it won't really mean anything. Ukraine will just become another EU member, another possible trading member, and that's about it. For the United States, it'll be a possible route of investment, more economic growth. For the Ukrainians, it'll be like hitting a gold mine economically, kind of like the Polish in the 90s. So that's really what it'll mean. But but Ukraine winning the war, Ukraine winning the war is going to be a big deal for them, but it's not going to be a big deal for a country like Argentina or Brazil or South Africa or Mexico. It's going to be a big deal for NATO, the EU countries, the United States, Canada, and the rest of the Western world. But for many others, it's just going to be kind of an event that happens. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And thank you so much once again for sponsoring. Well, thank you so much once again for support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Ed B, who puts in 820. And thank you very much, Ed, for that support. He says, Irish Ed from PA here, Pennsylvania. He says, it seems to me that Iran has grown big balls lately. And I doubt they developed a nuke on their own. And what are the chances that Russia or North Korea traded a low-yield nuke for arms? Israel is not a big place, and LSA.
And LSA, Ed, and I would have to agree, Israel is not a big place at all. It's tiny. It's incredibly tiny. 1 second, hang on. It's a true size map. 1 second, I got to show you this. This is something that I think is really eye-opening. Maps aren't accurate. These are Mercator projections. That's a whole other thing. I'm not going to explain that here, but pull it up. Mercator projection maps, and that's what we use mostly. But the size has actually changed the further north and the further south you go. And if we were to move Israel to, say, America, since we have a lot of American viewers here, this is how big Israel is compared to the United States. It spans all the way from Norfolk, Virginia, up to about Allentown, Pennsylvania. And that's how wide it is. This thing's a tiny place. Hitting it with a nuclear weapon would practically destroy Israel immediately. Incredibly fragile. But to answer the rest of it, Iran has grown some big balls, but they always act like that. This is something that historically they've done a lot, like seizing British petroleum tankers in the Persian Gulf for the hell of it for fun. And I would say that I doubt that they are probably able to develop a nuke without external help, but who knows if they really did create one and what circumstances they would have been able to get it under. But still, thank you so much once again for the support, Ed, and helping the channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that fairly well, and thank you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Up next, big shout out to Havlin Tuft, who put in a 5, as well as Dean London, who put in a 2, and the Exquisitor, who also put in a 2.
Exquisite.
And they said, Exquisite, they said, keep up the good work, guys, and thank you all 3 very much for that very generous support and always keeping us running. And also, we have a 5 from CK Bold, who orders the usual and says, take a live chat question, and we will. And thank you very much, CK, for that support. And the live chat question is going to go to, let's see here, it's going to go to Wandering, who says, should Russia have a white flag as standard military equipment?
Yes.
I said yes.
Yes, I think they should. And so with that, thank you so much for the support. Thank you for getting to the bottom of what the new flag for them will be. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $20 Canadian super chat from Ron Wolfson. And this is his first ever super chat. Big shout out to Ron. Thank you very much for helping to keep us running. And he says, 10 billion already sent to Israel, sitting in the Mediterranean. And that's one way to look at it.
Damn. That's deep. I like the way he looked at that. That's actually a really smart way to look at it. But it's actually more than 10 billion. Like we added together all the cost of all the ships. I would say it's probably closer to 17, maybe $20 billion that's inside of the Eastern Mediterranean right now. So we've certainly sent a lot of support just in the Navy monetarily towards the area of Israel. So I would agree with you, Ron. That's a really good way to look at that. And so with that, thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we've got a 5 from StrayCat241 who says World War II wasn't called World War II right away. And do you think we're in World War III? I think most Americans are too comfortable to realize it, but both my grandpas were in World War II.
And I thank you for the support, and that's true. World War II wasn't known as World War II for a little bit. I think it started to get known as a world war kind of towards, I think, 1943 or 44. But Yeah, you're right. I don't know. I don't think we're in a world war yet, because for it to be a world war, I think we would have to see a lot more countries involved than we see right now. Right now, Ukraine and Russia are at war. Israel and Hamas, well, really, Israel and Iran are at war through proxy. Israel is fighting Iran's terrorist groups, Hezbollah and Hamas. That doesn't really qualify as a world war yet, because those two wars, Ukraine, Russia, Iran, and Israel, are entirely separate from each other at this point. Geographically, they're not really tied to each other. And also, we don't see any external powers directly involved in either of them outside of the two belligerents. Like, we haven't seen America join Israel yet in an actual war, and we haven't seen anyone join Ukraine or Russia yet in the actual war. So I would say we're not really in a world war yet, but it's about as close as one can get before a world war begins. And hopefully we don't end up tracking down that path of a world war. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And I thank you so much once again for support. But I would say, while I don't think we're in a world war yet, we are quite close. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Russ Rizzo, who puts in a 5 and says, I'm telling you, what a doctor I've got. I told him I got a ringing in my ear. He said, don't answer it, Rodney.
Oh, man,
that was a pretty good one,
you.
actually.
Oh,
He's
man.
got a ringing in his ear, but he didn't answer it. Oh, man, I'm telling you.
Oh.
Thank you, Russ, very much for that Rodney impression, and we do appreciate that support very much. And we also have
Wow, you're
a
going to blow
5.
right past it. I'm trying to read it here. What the hell, man? I mean, we might be trying to rush.
We're running overtime, man. I got to wake up at 5 o'clock.
Oh, man, well, I got to too, man. You don't see me complaining, but oh, man. Russ Rizzo, he threw in a 5. He said, oh, man, I'm telling you. What a doctor I've got. Baby Limbachi. Oh, man, I'm telling you. I told him I got a ringing in my ear. He said, don't answer it. Oh, man, I'm telling you. And now we're on to the next one. Oh, man, I'm telling you.
And the next one goes to Hoodoo, Texas, who also throws in a 5 and says, Iran has had 154 earthquakes in the past 365 days of 1.5 magnitude or greater, and the whole region has lots of earthquakes, and look what happened in Turkey.
And I would agree, and I got to thank you so much for the support. I would say it largely appears to be normal seismic activity, just an elevated amount of it, but beyond that seems somewhat normal. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our last super chat goes to War Pig Mantis, who puts in a 5. And also, War Pig, we have covered this one. Right now, the embassies are not officially being overrun anywhere. They're under control at the moment. Obviously, that might change quickly, so we'll keep an eye on it. But for the moment, they are good, and they are not being overrun. So thank you very much for that support. And we are now moving on into our live chat questions. And tonight, we had the largest roster ever solving the Morse code. We had Toxic Bananas. Also, Cliff Simonson, Mark Hodges, Earl Bernew, Paul Schultz, Tightlines LSO, Kevin J., and Rumpelstiltskin. They all said, Enforcer, the Morse code says, don't you love to see America's finest weapons beating some Russians? I sure do. LSA.
Oh, man, I'm telling you.
And y'all got the Morse code message correct. That's the sound of money. Y'all hit that dead on the nail. I gotta thank y'all for deciphering the Morse code message for the 601st day of the war, and I love to hear that we're getting some new Morse code decoders, and also having the largest amount of people decipher the Morse code message tonight. That is incredibly cool. And so with that, we are on to the next super chat, and then we're going to be answering 3 live chats and rounding out tonight's stream.
All right, and our next super chat goes to R. Smith, who puts in a 20 Canadian, and he says, homework assignment for Thursday or later for Matter Enforcer. Why were infantry communicators, dismounted radio, called SIG pigs?
That's a good question, R. Smith, and I think I will try and get an answer to that. I won't be able to get an answer to that right now, but we will work on that as homework. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I'll try and make sure to remember that and have an answer for that. I'll probably pull it up after the stream right now. But with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that fairly well. And we're going to be getting 3 live chats, and then we're going to be rounding out tonight's stream due to time constraints. But with that, we are on to the first one.
All right, and our first one goes to Neil Vizanant, who says, are banks and mints considered legitimate military targets by law, and what are your thoughts?
I don't think so, because physically hitting a bank and destroying it doesn't destroy the financial assets it's keeping, such as money. Most money nowadays, especially for countries, isn't even inside of a bank. It's just kind of a number that's digitally kept. Although there is still physical money stores, it's not really what runs a country anymore. So I would say I don't really think those count as targets of war, because then we start getting into other civil aspects, like hell, the DMV could be a target of war at that point. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the second to last one of the night.
And this one goes to Fighting Finn, who says, does embassy security have the right to defend the embassy on foreign land?
Yes, because technically all U.S. embassies are actually on U.S. soil because the property that they encompass is technically handed over by that country to us. So technically it's U.S. sovereign land. And the embassy does have the right to protect itself from armed riots, whatever it may be, with force of arms. That's also why we have Marine detachments at every single embassy around the world that are armed, so that way they can provide security for the embassy in an emergency situation. So yes, we can. And so with that, we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who was the lucky last person to throw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is XMojo, who says that, do you think sending totally untrained drafted soldiers into the field without a scrap of gear should constitute some form of war crime?
Sadly, it can't, because then we're going to, because, they could start being arbitrarily stated. You could just go to a poor country like, say, Chad, because they probably have nothing really for their armed forces. Yeah, man. Oh, man, total Chad. But they probably have nothing but basic uniforms and AKs. And then what do we say? Do we say that their entire military is a war crime because they can't afford modern weaponry? Do we start to outlaw poor countries from having militaries? That's something that might get a little bit tough to apply on an overall basis. I don't think it's a war crime. I think that's something, though, that the citizens of a country should look at and go, wow, our government doesn't give a damn about us because they're giving us absolutely nothing to fight this war with. And so with that, I hope that does address that further well, at least in my opinion. And with that, we have reached the end of tonight's stream. I got to thank all of y'all so much once again for coming tonight. Of course, it's been an absolute pleasure to run this stream for all of y'all. At the peak, there were 6.8 thousand of y'all watching, and there has been 27,000 of y'all who have watched the stream since the very start. We are entirely honored to always be able to cover the news for every single one of y'all every single night. If you did enjoy, once again, make sure to subscribe, make sure to like, and make sure to comment, because we run this thing 6 days a week at 10 p.m. Eastern Time every single night except for Monday, putting out this news of the war in Ukraine and also some news of the war in Israel. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army never dies.
And good night, folks. Thank you all for another great stream. It's good to be back once again, and we'll see you all tomorrow. Slava Ukraine, and God bless Israel.
Yes. The Lee Spring Army sends its regards